anime of 2023. It's going to include December one as well. Now, unlike the rundown, which I'm going to do tomorrow, this is going to be a quick, probably 15 to 20 minute fast rundown of these 5 animes. I'm going to do a detailed rundown tomorrow, but this is a fast rundown. So I'm not going to get into too much. I do anime, I do manga, I do gaming, so on and so forth. But just to save time, I'm going to get straight into this one. The first anime you see before you is called Ars no Kyoju. And this is an interesting anime. It starts off with showing 2 individuals on a cliff. Basically, a woman is on a horse and a dude's carrying a sword. Now, if you ever played the game Warframe, think of it in the terms of what would happen if the Warframe didn't exist, but the power of the Warframe existed. Um, and it's imbued within the person. So, let's say Excalibur does Excalibur's thing, or Frost do Frost things. Basically, the gentleman with the sword is doing those different abilities. But here's the catch: the catch is, um, the woman that's on the horse. She's kind of like a summon Esper from Final Fantasy, but he doesn't summon her. It's basically she's present within his presence all the time. So when he sheaths his ability, she disappears and vanishes into thin air, and he's engulfed within her her power, or whatever it is, her essence, her force is infused within his body. That's why I say it was kind of like Warframe. Well, Warframe is simply a robot or an automaton, and he's fused with essential powers of the void, that's cast upon them through void energy. And each individual Warframe, based on their type, are able to execute a certain type of ability. So this gentleman here is capable of executing certain type of abilities based on his strength and his potential, using this woman, kind of Esper, um, that they're called atrophagia, or maybe I'm saying that wrong. But basically, it's like a summoning, but it's not technically a summoning. It's kind of like a reverse summoning. And it's something that's been going on for a very long time. So I won't get into it. So he basically fused with her, his hair turned white. He uses his power, he defeats the enemy, a giant monster that was there, and boom, title card of the actual anime. It's called Giant Beasts of Ars. So Ars no Kyoju means Giant Beasts of Ars. Moving on from that, you go into the next one, which is 30 years later. So that was a description of the past. So 30 years have passed since then, and we now see a little girl, or a teenager that was inside of a prison, escaping a prison. Moving on from that, she then jumps into the water, escapes out of the tower, swims, got on top of this guy's ship, and he's not interested because he's boozing up all night. So when the police or whoever, the local authorities, imperial guards, came by looking for this imprisoned girl who's supposed to be special, he's so drunk and stuff, he doesn't even care about anything anymore. He's basically a paladin. He used to have his own type of esper, or whatever they're called. I'll have to go deeper into that as I make the other video. So since he lost her, probably the woman he loved for his entire life, the story hasn't gotten deep into his backstory to describe why he's always boozing up. So he's drunk. He points in the direction where the little girl is running. He doesn't care what's going on in the town and everything. So now the Imperial soldiers are going to go in the direction where he's pointing the thumb towards. So he's drinking his life away, hoping that eventually he'll catch a bullet or get a sword and die and fall in combat by doing odd jobs. So he's basically like a gun for hire. But there's no guns in this world. This is a sword and shield world. Maybe there are guns, but none so far has been shown. So he's going around town looking for jobs to do stuff for, just so he could get more booze. Now during this trip and the travel, the girl who escaped managed to find clothes from a nice lady, gave it to her, and then she came across this nice little merchant in this merchant town where people are selling merchant stuff. And this girl, calling herself Meow, basically is a type of captcha. I'm not sure if that's how they're saying it. Basically, she basically has duplicates of herself. Think about moguls in Final Fantasy. She's a person, but there are many of them. There are many children that look exactly like her. And the only way to distinguish a child, one from the other, is the type of animal that's on top of their head. Every single child that looked like her has a different type of animal on top of their head. For who she is, she's called Meow, is because she has a cat on top of her head. Another one has a dog on top of her head. Another one have a rat or something on top of their head, so on and so forth. But that's how you describe who they are. So the girl in this scene right here, her name is, if I remember carefully, it's called Kami or Kumio, Kuumi, and she's known as Kuumi the 22nd. And she is basically going to say that later on when she meets Mr. Jiiro, who is also calling himself Mr. Already Dead. And he calls himself Mr. Already Dead because he doesn't care about life. So the girl finds this interesting little band, requests for the, interesting little ring from off the cat, request for the ring from off the cat. The girl gives it to her. She puts the ring on. And apparently this ring represents the Ring of Promise. And the Ring of Promise represents a prophecy of someone who's going to come to link and save all of ours from eternal darkness. So eventually she puts on the ring and magically fits on her hands. And Mr. Jiiro, during that period, is still looking for a job. During that time within Ars, in the kingdom, a young lady went into a castle. I mean, not a young lady went into a castle. A young lady came out of a council of a group of leaders of Ars, and she's basically, who she is going to be described later on throughout the stories. So far, I don't know her name yet. I got into the third episode, didn't know her name yet. I should look it up even further. I don't think the anime stated her name in the first and second episode. Probably not even in the third. But she was, at the moment, she's not that relevant. So she will probably become relevant throughout the series, but not at the moment. So she's not the relevant factor of the story so far, so you don't have to worry about that. What's most relevant is Mr. Jiiro right here, Mr. Already Dead. He asks, why do you need to know my name if I just want to do this job for you? The imperial government needs, or the imperial state needs to know the name of the person who is working for us, so if you do die, we get to give them a name of the person that died working for us, trying to do these jobs of defeating these giant beasts. So he calls himself Already Dead. So during the process of this, he finds a beast. One of his colleagues almost got killed. I can't really call him a colleague. A regular hunter almost got killed. He went to save the regular hunter by rescuing him, going up this little latch pulley that pulls him up, and he got saved. Also, during this time, that same night, the guards found the girl, aimed an arrow at the girl. The girl hit the girl in the arm. The girl got injured, and this black stuff came spewing out of the girl's arm. So she's still on the run, and then all of a sudden, this black stuff comes spilling out of the girl. Now what this black stuff is like a stone curse. So whoever it touches, they turn automatically to stone. So these guys automatically got stoned. And his curse is something that's very, very terrible and very bad. And the only way to control this curse is if you have a paladin who's able to make sure to calm the esper or the kami, or however she wants to call Kuumi or Kuumi, how to calm the Kuumi. Basically, Kuumis are I wouldn't say celestials; they're more the clerics. That's what Jiiro called them. Kuumis are clerics. So Jiiro sees it. Jiiro goes to save her before she causes more havoc and kills more people. And then they have this little strange little conversation, like an alternate reality where they're talking to each other while they're levitating. And she says her name is Kuumi, the 22nd. Jiiro says, well, why don't you have a paladin? She says, it's a long story, blah, blah, blah. Moving on from there, Jiiro says, "All right, fine. I'll teach you the basics later on. Just trust me. I'm going to do something. It's kind of weird, but." He just kissed her on top of the head, and then all of a sudden, she fused within his body, and then his hair turns white, just like the other dude. It's like, this will all be explained later on. That's what he says. Basically, he took down the beast, and she fused, and Artravesia, I believe that's the name of the power, that's cast upon these individuals, or the Kumis, or clerics, in order to cast these abilities. So it's kind of like a curse, but it's also like good fortune as well in order to defeat the beast. So that was that. So upon defeating the beast, she is extracted from him, kind of like an operator coming out of a warframe. So it's something very much like that. So that's what happens. The beast end. This guy is seen right here. He works for the imperial government. He's, I believe, he's a commander or captain. Not too sure, but he's very fascinated with dead things. He'll play a part later on throughout the story. I'm not too interested in him right now. He's not that much of a factor. What I am interested in is the history of the clerics, where they came from, how they came into being, and the power called Misma that they wield. That's extremely dangerous and basically is a curse that could destroy all people. So it hasn't gotten to that level that a lot of things have been described with regards to what it is and how the curse came to being and why the little girl has the curse, or and why she was in the tower and in prison to begin with. But all these things will be explained in time. So far, I'm into the third episode. So moving on from that, we then see this dude right here hanging out, this old guy, looking for the girl again and looking for Jiiro, who saved the girl. And then we see this next dude who's also looking for the girl and looking for Jiiro at the same time. These are all hunters, and I'm assuming that these are also paladins, just like Jiiro, who probably have their own clerics that are with them. Or maybe they don't have their own clerics that are with them, and they're looking for their own cleric in order to fuse with them and keep them as their own personal, uh, I guess you could say their personal power on the side. So it's not described if they have their own yet or they don't, but that's far as what that is. So moving forward, the little girl, Meow, or however you want to say it, or Ayao, um, stole Jiro's little knife, his special knife, which allows him to wield the power to turn into a powerful, formidable force using the girl's Kumi's ability. Stole the knife from him. Eventually, Jiiro got pissed off, can't find it. He tries to summon it. So the girl got levitated, but it cannot exit out of the prison. So Jiiro has to find her and the girl who got captured by the guards again. Well, not the little girl, but Kuumi got captured again. So Jiiro found them, extracted both of them. They all escaped within his ship, and eventually they left the capital and are now within a forest. And so Jiiro is saying, well, I'm just going to stick with you guys simply because I need to get to the nearest town so I could refuel and get some supplies and so on and so forth. And I also need to find someone to be a proper paladin for Kuumi here. So I'll stick with you guys until I find Kuumi's a proper paladin. That's that. Moving on from there, Jiiro proceed forward into the forest to do some hunting. And that's the end of the story with regards to episode 1, 2, and 3. Now, the third episode is mostly doing with Jiiro and Kuumi and Mia being within a village and learning about different cultures and different species of villages, as well as the very dangerous beasts, which are red-eye beasts. So that's that for this anime. Now, so far, this anime is good. And another thing I like about this anime, it takes a very Gundam Zeta approach when it comes to its ending. Showing the planet, showing the stars, and showing the person walking using the planet and stars. This has always been a good formula for something that you believe might actually turn out to be great. and very rarely that anime that used this type of format to show someone walking in distance in the stars while there's a planet showing has ever been a true failure. There have been some, but most have used this formula towards the end of their story has been successful. Am I saying that this is going to be one of those? Probably not. But so far as I could tell, the Beast of Ars is had a good hook, had a decent story, has very interesting characters, has very mysterious stuff going on in the past, especially with curses, paladins, and the government as well as the beast, and has some, there's still a mystery with regards to what Kuumi is, where she comes from, what she's doing, and this ring of promise being the savior of ours. So that said, that was the that anime. Moving on to the next. Now, ours would be considered my third favorite anime so far of January. My second favorite anime of January is this anime right here. And this anime that you're seeing right here is basically a street with different cars and everything that's going on the street. And this anime is called Inu-Oh. So this anime starts with a street, with lights on the street, with people on the street, and it's the middle of the night. And during this time, a gentleman is playing his his biwa, and he's a biwa priest from way back, from way back. Now I'm not exactly 100% sure if it's called a biwa, so I have to look that up. But in the story of Inu-Oh, he's known as a biwa priest. So this guy's been dead for quite some time. So as you see these cars and these buildings and everything, he's basically been dead for a long time on this highway, on this road, playing and playing and playing for centuries. So the story goes back. The story goes back, way back to the time of the Kamakura, to the time of the Ashikaga. Basically, the intersecting point between that of the Kamakura and the Ashikaga. When Taira was fighting the Minamotos, and the Minamotos being the Kamakura Shogunate, before they became the Kamakura Shogun. So it tells the story of what happened within this time period of two ruling parties, the Taira and the Minamotos, fighting over lands, and eventually the war led to a huge sea battle from long ago, and which eventually in history was a true thing. The Minamotos won. Passed down into the story, you find that the strange guy found this mask, and this mask grants you the power to any wish you want. Now, the man that finds this mask is very interested in Japanese folk songs, Japanese dancing, and Japanese music. So combining all three. Well, mostly back in the days, it was typically just the music and the dance. Now, this dance, if I remember clearly, I would have to look it up. I don't remember the name of the dance, but it was the Saga Sarigaku or something like that. I would have to look that up. That's not important. What is important that original type of dance was eventually replaced by Inu-Oh's type of Japanese traditional dancing and music, which is a real thing that's carried to today. Now, I wouldn't say Inu-Oh as in this anime, but that Neo or Neo Noh has been something that's been transitioned from way back in the past to now, and it's a real thing. So, continuing from there, he summoned this demon using the mask. It's a demon mask. He wanted to be the best performer, musical performer, as well as dancer at the same time. In order for this to happen, the demon mask offered to claim his child for himself. However, the child did not die. Instead, the child turned into a deformed creature. And that's the sad story of the beginning of Inu-Oh. Now, Inu-Oh is not a completely sad story. Inu-Oh has very positive things, but it starts off sad, kind of ends sad, but in the middle, that's where the magic happens. The true magic of the story is not simply a story of the cruelty of the shogunate and the people who lived during that time. It's the representation of overcoming obstacles and how music transcended from ages to ages to ages to ages to ages to where we are now, past the Reformation period of the of the Meiji Dynasty to modern Japan right now. That these things, these musics have still existed to this day and still carry on way past those times. So going back to this, the gentleman walks by the room, doesn't care for his wife, doesn't care for the deformed baby. He's so self-absorbed within his deed to be the best performer. Cares little for his wife, cares little for his child that's been deformed. Now, this scene here shows the Great Sea Battle between the Taira and between the Minamotos. The Dannoura, if I'm saying that correctly. I'm probably not saying that correct. I'm butchering it, but I'm trying to go fast here. And, okay, so the boy, the first appearance that we see of one of the main protagonists of the story, and this isn't Inu-Oh. This is one of the main protagonists. There are two. There are two main protagonists. There's Inu-Oh, and there's Tomona. And Tomona is the little boy you see here. So first, he dived into the Dannoura sea to fish for treasure, for various lords and stuff, just so they could survive. Fishing for fish is not the only way, but treasure from the old wars, from the Kamakura era, is something that they have been doing for their survival. So basically, we're no longer in the Kamakura era anymore. We're within the Ashikaga era, which is also known as the Muromachi Shogunate. And that is some, if I remember correctly, Muromachi started in 14th century and ended in 16th century. Yeah, early 16th century. So about 200 years. Well, maybe not even. But basically, Taira, which was 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, yeah, about 300 years. I would say about 300 years after the battle, the Great Sea Battle. Anywhere from 250, I would say about 200, anywhere from 200 to 300 years have passed since this battle. The boy is not diving for treasure. Moving forward from that, his father is also diving for treasure. They find this huge box, and it's a treasure of the samurais from the Taira era. I'm not sure if it's Minamoto or it's Taira, but it's supposedly to be a cursed treasure. And lo and behold, turns out to actually be a cursed treasure. It's a cursed sword. And this cursed sword not only blinded Tomona, but it also kills Tomona's father. So the truth of the curse of the Taira's treasure and that of the battle is true. Or should I say the curse of the Heike, Heike period, or the sword of the Heike is true. So moving on from that, later see the boy growing up a little, blind, met another blind old man, a bearer priest. First introduction to the bearer priest. This bearer priest teaches them how to play and how to survive by using music. They eventually travel together and eventually travel so much that they heard stories about different bearer priests being killed for a reason they don't know. So they have to stay clear of that. Moving forward, we then get into a part of the story that shows a little creature. And this little creature happens to be the same little creature that was from the man who wanted to be the best performer ever. So this little creature wears a mask just so no one could see his face. And I really can't call him a creature. He's a boy. He's basically a little boy. But he's a deformed little boy. His body's deformed, his arms deformed, his legs deformed, his face is deformed. So much so that he has to wear a gourd to represent his face, because his eyes, his left eye and his right eye, are kind of vertical in that sense. So he's been running around doing things just like a dog and going into ponds and stuff, eating out of pots just like dogs. Moving on from that, then see Inu-Oh looking up from his little mask, gourd mask, to see that someone has died in the family. And moving on from that, and supposedly that's the mother. Moving on from that, Inu-Oh learns how to do dancing. So he'd been seeing his father training his two other sons, who he had later on, how to dance, how to train them how to dance, how to perform, how to do everything that is required to be a great performer. So Inu-Oh start to learn how to do dance and using different rhythms of the environment, the sound of nature, rain, so on and so forth. Moving on from that, he did it so much, and got a hang of it so much. He loves it so much. Eventually, wham, bam, bam, for reasons unknown, boom, he now have legs. Moving on from that, it's very weird. It's kind of a curse. So in the sense that the creature, the demon that was supposed to claim his son, I think that demon kind of tricked the husband of the wife, making him think that he's going to give him what he wants, but in all intentions, he probably wanted Inu-Oh, his son, to actually succeed him and claim him. So basically, he gave the man what he wanted, to be rich and famous, up to a certain point, and eventually, his rich and famousness would eventually be toppled by his deformed son, which is kind of amusing and ironic in a way. So moving on from that, you then see how things are seen from the point of view of Tomona, the blind kid. So when Tomona sees something, he sees spatters of kind of like ink droppings on a pad or on a canvas or black canvas, and every time it spatters and drops, it creates an image of whatever it is that it represents. Like say a bird is picking up seeds. When the seeds drop, the bird picks up the seeds. Or when the bird poops, Tomona sees it based on sound and movement within the dark. And when the bird moves its wings, flaps, and so on, Tomona sees the bird based on that. He cannot see the full form of the bird. He can only see the silhouette of the bird. So moving on from that, Tomona eventually became so good with his, I would say, second sight. He started to hear voices, and eventually he came to see things that weren't there, and those things were ghosts. So he's able to see the ghost of his father now, and which tells him, like, listen, you have to free us. You have to free us from this curse, this cursed sword, and reclaim our family name. Make me go to heaven in peace and reclaim your eyes again, so on and so forth. Tomona has been on a journey to see if he could do this for his father and for his family. And his mother had died a long time ago due to the depression of the situation of his father's dying and his son going blind. A very tragic story. So moving on from that, father tells him what I just said. Do your job. Find out a way to set me free. Make sure your mother is free. You'll eventually be in heaven, so on and so forth. So Tomona is now depressed. He walks on a bridge, the same bridge that we eventually saw at the beginning, which turns into like a huge bustling modern city bridge with cars and stuff. This is the same bridge that he's walking over now. And lo and behold, who was on that bridge happened to be Inu-Oh himself. Now, unlike other creatures which Tomona can only see in black and white, he sees Inu-Oh in the form of purple or kind of rosy type of color. And that's very strange to him. So he's fascinated by this color individual who he can't see the form of, like you see other creatures. You can only see the whole like painterly silhouette of a rosy type color. Eventually, Inu-Oh asks him, like, what are you doing with that instrument? Can you play something for me? So he started playing stuff for Inu-Oh. Moving on from that, Inu-Oh then say, I love your music, blah, blah, blah. But you know what I'm going to do, because I love the music so much. One day I'm going to become a performer. Since I like dancing anyway, and be one of the greatest performer there is. Why don't you come and join me and eventually play for me, and I'll dance and we'll have fun. Tomona then says that'll be great. So eventually Tomona meets Inu-Oh again when they're a little bit older. You know, they're both maturing and they get older. This is like, I don't know, a few years later, probably 2 or 3 or 4 years later. They're like teenagers now. So very close with each other now. So Tomona says, okay, I could see spirits, and but you can't see spirits. It tells you can't see spirits. Inu-Oh say, no, I can't see spirits. It's like, all right, I could see spirits, but I could guide those spirits towards you, since you like to perform, and they could tell you their stories. It's like, well, you have to find them first. So Inu-Oh summon his dad. His dad tells him, oh, there's spirits all around him. It's like there's something about Inu-Oh why the spirits are surrounding him. Some type of power. Could be the demon's power. Could be the power of his energy or whatever it is. Of the deformity or whatever it is. Could be or just his specialness of his character. But they're surrounding him. So Tomona tell him, listen, these guys are around you. I'll see if I can make them talk to you. Eventually, Inu-Oh starts to hear them, but he cannot see them like Tomona can. So he hears them, and he said, okay, one at a time. Tell me all your stories. And I'm going to elaborate your stories into dance and into a performance. So every time you want someone to hear your stories, hear of your great deeds from the Kamakura, from the Taira, from, for the past 300 so years, of all your different stories, of all the fallen samurais throughout the ages. I'm going to tell your stories in dance. So Tomona says that this is awesome, this is great. He's able to see all these different spirits, and so they're able to concoct a fantastic performance. So the very first, so this is where the story gets very complicated. I really say this was a quick rundown, but this is probably not going to be a quick rundown. This is probably going to be the video itself. So, but I'm trying to cut through these fast because there are actually 5 of these anime. So this is the first performance of Tomona and his group of people. It has 3 guys. So he's playing like something like a guitar, and there's a drummer on the other side, and there's also a pit blowers. There, he's playing his bio like it's a guitar and stuff. Basically, this is where the anime starts to get real fun. I would say about 30 or 40 minutes into the anime, after Sass of Pass and the story goes away. I would say about 30 to 35 minutes. That's when the story of Inu-Oh really kicks into high gear. That's when the performance of the story really kicks into high gear, because then you have these musical performance that you didn't see coming, and they sound like they're from 70s rock stories, like Kiss, or I don't know how to describe it. It's basically like a combination of Elvis and Kiss and Shogun performers from way back in the days. So it's basically rock and roll, but for the Muromachi period. If rock and roll was within the Muromachi period, but not just regular rock and roll. If it was like hairband rock and roll, or 70s rock and roll, or like Led Zeppelin. Like say if Led Zeppelin was in the Muromachi era, that's how it sounded like. That's how the music sounded like. It didn't sound like traditional Japanese music. It sounded like if Led Zeppelin was in the Muromachi period of the Ashikaga ruling. So moving on from that, the performance that they did, Tomona and his group of friends, including Mr. Flamethrower right here, who spits out fire, just to increase the performance and increase people coming to see them, just to give a little show. They start pick up. It starts picking up. The popularity starts picking up. But here's the best part. It's a two-form performance. First, Tomona does his performance on the bridge, and then under the bridge, Inu-Oh does his dance performance. So the first part of Inu-Oh, and Inu-Oh, or however you want to call it, is the verbal performance, the song of the story. The next is the physical performance, the performance of the story in physical form. But at the same time, Inu-Oh is singing as well. They're both singing and they're both performing. But Inu-Oh's one is more of a physical performance, where Tomona's one is more of a verbal performance. It's like Kiss being on stage singing and singing stories versus, how would I describe it? How would I describe it? Going to Disney, going to Lucas, Lucas Studios, or what's it like? I don't know. It's going to Disneyland and seeing a Disneyland performance, or watching a huge concert. But it's not a huge. But it's not like a concert. It's like a live theatrical performance, or it's like going to Broadway, like watching Broadway and watching The Lion King. That's how Inu-Oh's one is. It's like watching The Lion King. It's verbal, it's physical, and it's performing arts. So Inu-Oh's is mostly performing arts. So moving on from that, Inu-Oh does its own performing arts thing, and then it gets really, really into it later on. So past the first 10 minutes, after the 30 minutes of the 30-minute marker, it then gets real heavy into the whole 70s rock physical performance stuff. Thing starts to go into high gear, like real high, and the music starts to become so great that it's like they're rock stars. They're rock stars of the Shogunate, and the people love them so much. The women love them so much. It starts to carry Tomona on top of them. You know, like like if someone jump into a crowd, you hold them up within the crowd. They lift them up, and women kisses all over him and stuff. And they move him throughout the crowd with their hands until he gets onto the stage while he's lying on top of everybody. It's freaking awesome. Moving on from that, I get another performance by Tomona on the bridge. And as these performances go on later, there's about a full 30 minutes of performance within the story. But the story is wise enough to cut back every now and again to a story where they're not performing. And then they kick up the story again. Now, the only bad thing I'll have to say with regards to this anime is that there are two songs that are repeated over and over again. I didn't like that. It's like they didn't think of a proper song to replace for Tomona, so they gave him two repeated songs. So basically, he's saying the same song like 3 times. So that's the only thing bad about this anime, and that's one of the reasons why it's not my #1 anime. If it wasn't for the same song repeated twice or 3 times, I would have made this my #1 anime, because not a lot of people like rock opera, and people say this anime is like a rock opera. I wouldn't consider it like a rock opera. There's nothing operatic about this. I mean, it feels like you're watching. Yes, it feels like you're watching an opera, like you're watching Othello on stage, or you're watching Brunhilde. But opera usually has to do with someone that's very vibrant within their voice, or a sound that's very vibrant, that's all around. These are secluded individual sounds on specific places. So I'm not exactly sure. I guess you can call it a rock opera if you really wanted to think about it that way, because it does feel like it's a rock opera. Actually, now I think about it, it does feel like a rock opera, and very much, because this is a good representation. Let's say you go to see an opera. Eventually, someone has to put the flames behind here, and then a man will have to be wearing like a neon type, fluorescent type suit, and then he's going to be doing his dancing and everything, and then songs is going to be going on at the back. So yes, it's very much like a rock opera. So it's very interesting. Eventually, it gets really, really crazy. I mean, it picks up. The music picks up, but then the music really starts to pick up. And I mean, baby, the music picks up a lot. That's why I was thinking about this being my number one, but no. Um, at this point, this song is called The Whale. It's a giant image of a whale on with lighting at the back, and he's standing on top of this huge looking bridge or like a patio or an overpass, and he's singing the song of the whale. And he not just sings it; he performs it, and everyone is singing along, and it gets crazy. I'm talking about it gets crazy. It's not just a group of people or lots of people. It's like a sea of people. It's like if you were to go to a concert, there were like 1,000 or even more than 1,000 people there to see it. And it gets crazy. It goes into singing, then it goes into fire dancing, then it goes into martial arts, then it goes into break dancing, and then it goes into a part where he starts swinging on a wire and he jumps onto the huge looking curtain with the whale light behind it, and then water are within these huge tubes and stuff, and they splashes out like he's floating on top of the whale as the whale is rising behind the curtain. And as he's rising behind the curtain, it's all the people that you don't see. The people are all within this dark area. There are nothing but people here, nothing but people. All it's like a concert, and this is the seclusion of the concert. So it's a big ass concert. This whole anime is like one miniature concert or a big ass concert. Past the 30%, 35% marker or 40% marker, once you get past 30 minutes of this anime, it starts going into apeshit territory with rock concert performance. So it goes crazy. And then kids start doing breakdancing, and then even little kids like 5-year-olds start going crazy. Everyone start jumping up and having fun. And eventually, Inu-Oh, his entire body, his deformed body, turns into a man. So the greater the performance, the greater the performance, greater he becomes, with his people loving him, people loving his music, people loving his performance. He becomes a man, and he becomes the greatest man of his age, with Tomona as his friend and his personal, you know, like two sides of a coin. So eventually, Tomona and Inu-Oh are now, young adults in their early 20s. Maybe they're still in their teens, late teens, or early 20s. Who knows? They're both famous throughout all of, the Ashikaga kingdom, or those who the Ashikaga knows throughout these lands. They're both famous, and that kind of draws the attention of the shogun. And the shogun kind of doesn't like the fact that they're drawing so much attention from his type of performance, which he considers under his shogunate power. There can only be one performer in his land. So the problem of his existence is going to show up later on. So moving on from that, more performance, performance by fires, performance by Mount Fuji, performance in snow. I'm talking about performance everywhere. So there's about a total of 5 different performances throughout the story, 5 or 6 performances throughout the story. This is just a representation of a performance. This fire performance, this Mount Fuji performance, and this snow performance, all one performance. They're just showing different locations, but there's probably a total of 5 or 6 performances throughout the entire anime. So moving on from that, the shogun here, Yoshimitsu doesn't like that at all. He wants to see the Inu-Oh performance for himself, and he hears that Inu-Oh has an ugly face, like a monster's face. So he wants to reveal that face to the public so people could dissuade him. But unfortunately, Yoshimitsu's wife, the shogun's wife, is fascinated with Inu-Oh, and doesn't like Yoshimitsu's type of music. Inu-Oh, in order to appease his wife, he sets up a way to see the performance of Inu-Oh himself. However, towards the end of the anime, he's not going to kill Inu-Oh or anything, because that would just, breaks his wife's heart and stuff. But it doesn't turn out good for our happy friends Tomona and Inu-Oh towards the end. But the Shogun doesn't exactly get what he wants anyway, regardless. So in the end, it is kind of a happy story, but it also is a bad story. So the princess goes to see Inu-Oh, and she's fascinated by him. You know, she's going crazy. She's like a fangirl or something. Shogun says to calm yourself, girl. You know, calm yourself, wife. You know, he's just a performer, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a jealousy of Inu-Oh's popularity over him. And if you know anything about any shogun, once you start to become more important than them, that's a problem. No one can be more important than the shogun himself. So the shogun kind of devised a way to satisfy his wife at the same time disrupt Inu-Oh. So this was the last performance of Inu-Oh and Tomona together. And so this was probably the, if not the second best, is the best performance. Because this dude goes into like, I thought I was watching everything, but then once I got to the part where this dude starts to do ballerina stuff, I mean, I'm like, what am I watching? I thought this was rock opera. But this dude starts doing ballerina, he starts doing gymnastics, he starts gliding on the sea. I'm talking, he starts dancing and doing ballet dancing on the sea or on the ocean or on the pond, wherever they are right now. But there's a wire attached to him, to his front. It's a performance. It's to pretend and to perform and to give the idea that he's actually floating on water. So it was a magnificent performance. And the performance goes from all the way from morning to afternoon to night. And the shogun is there, and everyone's loving the performance. I'm loving the performance myself as well. And it becomes like this interesting light performance of different use of colors, different use of lighting, different use of silhouette, different use of shadows. And that's another reason why I wanted to make this anime my #1 anime. The use of lighting, the use of shadows, the use of colors in this is fantastic. If it wasn't for the story, this would be in my #1 anime. So it was a great performance, and people went crazy. Eventually, Tomona, being able to see ghosts and stuff, is able to dig deeper into the stories of Inu-Oh's past. So he's able to see how Inu-Oh is able to be conceived through the whispers of ghosts. And then he learns of how Inu-Oh became deformed, and he learns of what the father did. And Tomona tells Inu-Oh what happened, how he became deformed. And now Inu-Oh learns that, so that's what happened, why I became this way. And so he made his last song in dedication to not just himself, but towards his wayward father, or should I say his bastard father. Say, this is your farewell, and this is my rise to the top, and you will never be what I am. I am becoming what you should have been, what you desire to be, but you will never be it because you abandon your morals, your hopes, and more than anything, your child and your family in order to be successful. So this last performance was a bitch, because basically he's saying, this is my last, F you to his father. And it's a big one, because light starts going out of the sea, and a huge dragon. I don't know where a dragon came from. A dragon starts flying around the damn bridge, and flies into the sky and flies all the way around the shogun and turns into this huge canopy of nothing but bright mystical light. So it is a hell of a performance. And so the father wanted to get power again and to reclaim power. He wants to show off to himself, to the shogun. He wants to show off his performance to the shogun. And of course, he tried to get the demon to join the side again. The demon says, well, you gave me your son in order to become the greatest performer. However, it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. You cannot reclaim your son. You cannot force me to reclaim your son if I already tried to reclaim him. If you go back on your promise for me to reclaim your son, then I have no choice but to reclaim you to go back in your promise. If you want me to destroy your son, which you willing to give to me, you will be destroyed in return. And that's what eventually happens to him. He gets turned into nothing but plate of blood, basically. I'm not going to show it, but he just turned into nothing but plate of blood. And eventually, after the death of his father, his final death, Inu-Oh's face is now turned into a human face. So the death of his father was the transformation of himself into a full human. So it's very dark irony, but not on the side of Inu-Oh, in my opinion. It's like, screw that guy. So eventually times passed, and the Shogun, still being jealous, eventually wanted to figure out a way to shut down Inu-Oh and Tomona for good. But he couldn't do it, so he had to figure out a way to do it. In order to do it, he had to separate Tomona and Inu-Oh from each other. So he forbids that Tomona play his music anymore, but he could keep Inu-Oh's physical performance. But Tomona's music has to end. They cannot be any type of music greater than the type of music he's into. So Tomona's music had to end. Tomona's music is a catalyst for Inu-Oh's performance, or should I say, it's helpful towards Inu-Oh's performance. They could keep Inu-Oh's performance, but they would have to get rid of Tomona's music type. So Inu-Oh hates this. Inu-Oh wants to kill the Shogun because of this. However, the Shogun has a bodyguard right next to him and about to cut Inu-Oh down. But so what the Shogun then tells him, like, listen, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill Tomona. So that quickly changes Inu-Oh's mind, and Inu-Oh's, basically, okay, I'll agree with what you say if you save my friend Tomona. Eventually, that didn't happen at all. Mostly because Tomona says, I refuse to stop playing my music. So Tomona kind of killed himself at the same time, but in some ways the Shogun wanted to do it from the very beginning. So Tomona kind of killed himself, but at the same time the Shogun really wanted him to continue to play so he could kill him. So, and then that's the end of that story. And we came to the street again. 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 years pass. We're now in modern Japan, modern trees, modern buildings, back on the street again. Cars are there. And Tomona is still there, playing his biwa, waiting and waiting. 700 years, 800 years, who knows? Eventually, Inu-Oh comes up to him and says, hey, Tomona, it's been a while. Can't believe you've been on this bridge this whole time. Say, it took me this long to find you because eventually you returned back to your old school name. I didn't have no idea that you returned to your old school name. That's why it took me so long to find you. Another reason why I don't like this anime as much as I should. You're trying to tell me from so many centuries of dead, it took you like that long to realize that he would go back to his original name to find him. That many years, that doesn't make sense to me. And that is kind of like, that took me out of the anime for a while. So that's the reason why I'm kicking this as my second anime, not as my first. So that was pretty much the end of the anime called Inu-Oh. And it was badass as hell, man. And I recommend that anyone check it out. I recommend someone check out Ars of Kyojo, which is Giant Beasts of Ars, and Inu-Oh. If you don't like Inu-Oh, check out Giant Beasts of Ars. Now, the third anime we're getting into, because I want to not go over 2 hours with regards to this. The third anime we're getting into right now, and let me check this out. Dannoura. Okay, yeah. Let me say it correctly. The third anime I'm going into, and it's going to be not my third. Not my third favorite, but my fourth favorite anime is Dannoura Saito Isekai ni Iku. Basically, the Handyman Saito in another world, and that's what it's called. Now, if I said this before, and I probably didn't, this was during a period when Google Plus existed, and I was still doing manga reads, and Dannoura, the Handyman Saito in another world, was one of those reads that I did, and this was years ago. So for this anime to now be on the market and develop into an anime, I'm proud of this anime because I went through the very first 2 volumes of this manga when it originally came out, and it was great. And it's not my third anime, it's my fourth anime on the list, but there were actually legitimately 20 animes, 20 or 25 animes, new, no, I would say about 20 animes, slightly, maybe 21, new animes that came out in January. So for me to have a top 5 out of 20 animes, that's pretty good. So Benria Saito is one of the Handyman Saito in Another World. So to start off, I'll get into this one. This next anime is very interesting. I know about it for about 2 years. It has a unique style, a very unique art style. The manga, if you read the manga, it starts off in black and white. And then every time there's something that's very elaborate or something that's to represent a person's characteristics or to introduce a character, that character will be done in color and very elaborate color. Um, what stuck out to me about Benria, it was never a typical sword and shield type story. It was a kind of a goof at the start, but it had very good camaraderie when I first read it. It also had a little romance and a little humor, and that was something I was also into. And as you get deeper into the anime, it became like this huge adventure with all these different adventure types. And some of the stuff was so hilarious, it reminded me of Gintama. I really want to have Benria Saito as my third, but there was a lot of good anime. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the Handyman Saito from Another World right now. So the Handyman Saito from Another World shows that this huge keyhole. And what the Handyman Saito from Another World, or Saito, does is that he could pick any lock. He's basically a locksmith, but he's also, a Mr. Fix It type of guy. You know, he could make things and he could fix things whenever he wants to. He's not like a metalsmith or a smithy guy, a weaponsmith. But he's more like a do-it-yourself type of guy when it comes to solving certain problems. But he can't wield swords, he can't use magic or none of that stuff because this guy is not from this world. He's from the real world. So here you see him standing outside this door, and he's the Handyman Saito, and he's wearing his uniform, being a handyman from the real world. What happened is supposedly he got run over by a truck, but he never got run over. It's like he disappeared in the blink of an eye. He should have been run over, but he didn't. He didn't get run over. He just disappeared and ended up in this world. And the first scene that's shown within this world is that he's with a group of people, 4 individuals: a wizard, a swordswoman, a sword and shield woman, and a fairy. And then there's him. So there's 4 of them. And this is how the manga started as well. So I like the fact that the anime is going in exact direction that the manga is going. It's not deviating from it because that's how the manga started. It started with just a group of 4 people together. Didn't show any backstories. Didn't show anything. They're just people that were inside of a dungeon trying to unlock something and get a treasure. So moving on from that, then you start to get some backstory into Saito's life. He tells them that, okay, yeah, I used to be a guy that opens lock in the real world when people get locked out of their place, or a handyman that fix certain things when they need to be fixed. But I didn't get real paid for it, and people didn't like me, and eventually I got fired from my job. So Raelza said, that sucks. You're so good at your job, but like, well, we'll see how good you are. You just go first things first. We're introduced to the armored warrior Raelza, and this is a chick that's in this armor, and she's kind of like the reverse version of Guts. She's doubting Saito's capability to be a proper locksmith at the beginning, but she's basically like a Guts version. What that means is if you piss her off, she goes berserk. Yeah, so she's a berserker. She wears heavy armor. She carries a huge Guts sword, and she's a berserker. You get her angry, she'll just go crazy and become super strong. That's her power. Fused with magic, she's almost unstoppable. I believe she's a level 41 fighter at the beginning of the story. The story says so. So moving on from that, you find the next guy on the list is the wizard Morlock. Now, how it's showing these different characters with these different images and these different texts and stuff, that's exactly how it's shown within the manga as well. So I'm very grateful that they kept that within the anime as well. So Morlock is the next one. He's like a level 81 wizard. and he's always having back problems, and he's probably the funniest person within the manga as well as within this anime. Once I saw it in the manga, I thought it was hilarious, and he's even more hilarious in the anime. To be honest with you, I find it even more hilarious. Now, the next character we'll come across is Lafla. I didn't have Lafla was one. So she's the level 35 fairy, and she heals the old man back, and she always collects payment for gold coins from the old man or from anyone for service. And there's a backstory for that as well. Moving on from that, Saito said, "Well, I'm the weak link of all you people. You people are pretty strong, and obviously all he does is fix things." So eventually, Raelza tells him, or should I say, the old man told Saito that eventually one day all three of them died. Raelza died, Lafta died, and this third person that used to be in the party also died. Now, it's very curious to me that they didn't say who this third party member was yet throughout the anime, but eventually you get to that. So, moving on forward, the old man is so OP, he eventually sold all his property, sold his clothes, and sold everything that belonged to his teammate, but in order to offer it into a cleric church of reviving his people back to health. And eventually we see the old man wearing like a bikini armor and stuff, and he basically kept Raelza's bikini and wore it while the priest is summoning them from the grave and bringing them back to life. Why he decided to wear it, I don't know. But I thought it was one of the strangest and funniest thing because he's such a skinny guy and he's wearing a bikini. And it's stupid. Oh, there he is. Okay. Lafpa, La Fampan, or should I say her name's La Fampan. So I did tag it. Okay, so La Fampan. She always collects gold, and the reasons behind it is because her people, her fairy people, are cursed. They were cursed by the Moon Queen, and I'll get into that story later. But at the moment, Saito fixed her a bag so she could always carry her coins in there. They're building up. Every time she collects a coin, she has to keep it within a pouch. So Saito, being a handyman that he is, built her a backpack she could put all her coins in, so it doesn't be heavy on her hands. She could just wear it on her back. Boom. Moving on to the next, we see something very strange, and this is how I basically can say this is one very hilarious anime. Typically, when you're within a group of fighters, there are four people: wizard, and then you have your heavy armor, your heavy sword with the wizard, and then you have your support, which is typically a fairy or someone else. There's most of the times there's never like four people. There's typically three, but every now and again there's four people. Well, most times they're always group of two. Sometimes there's three, sometimes there's four, but most time it's groups of two: a mage and a heavy weapon type. So the hilarity of this character is that he's both a heavy weapon type and a mage type, and he's basically called the way of the heavy magic tank. I mean, it gets ridiculous because he's not supposed to be all four characters combined. He's not supposed to be the fairy and the wizard and the heavy weapons wielder and also like the sport healer at the same time. He's basically all of them at once. He's basically saying, "I'm so OP, I don't need anybody. I could be by myself." It's hilarious. He's one of the more hilarious people throughout the anime. Eventually, you come to see basically past episode 3. Once you get into episode 5, once it does arrive, it starts to get really hilarious down the road. I mean, if they're following the manga, yes. The next group of people are more adventurous. I mean, this anime has tons of adventures. That's the reason why this is my 4th favorite anime. It's a lot of adventuring happening in this anime. I love it. We meet this new group of people. I don't know their names yet. I don't remember them from reading it from manga, which is kind of sad. But the standard trope of of well, it's a good trope. It's not a bad trope, but it's a standard trope. Who's wielding the big axe? Is it the dude or is it the chick? Well, typically in most anime, it would be the dude. But here's the thing. Once you throw in a girl in a maid outfit, and you have several weapons let's say there's more than one or two weapons here. Let's say there's a sword here, and then there's a javelin here, and then there's a big ass axe here, and then there's a wand here, and then there's blades here, and then there's throwing knives here, and then there's like say a chainsaw or something, and then or a huge hammer. Which do you think the maid will be carrying the most? She'll be carrying obviously the biggest weapon more than anything, the most. And that I'm not sure if that's used to be something in the past, but in current manga, for the past I don't know, say 10 or for the past 15 years now, the maid carrying the big ass no, not even for the past 10 years now, maid carrying the big ass weapon has become the standard. Like if you see a maid in an anime and you see weapons around, typically that maid is going to be wielding the biggest one of them all. I mean, it's hilarious. So once you see any anime and you see a chick wearing maid outfit, it's more likely that she's going to be wielding the big ass axe, and it's hilarious. So she wields that big axe, and her support is carrying the small mage and the torch, and they're heading deep into the tunnels in order to do treasure hunting. Moving on from that, we find there's another. The story continues on, and our boy Saito is now within an item shop, and he goes in an item shop to buy items like he typically does because that's kind of like it's kind of like a Home Depot or something back in the past. Item shops where you could get your resources and items for building weapons and stuff was kind of like a Home Depot of the ancient past or medieval past. So that's what he did. He went in there to get items. He played with Hibiscus and talked to the shop owner, and eventually Raelza went into the store wearing a different type of armor, and then pretending that she was going to buy something, and just because she wanted to see Saito. It's at this point that it's revealed that Raelza has this very rising interest, not just interest, but a rising interest with Saito. I don't know the reason for it yet, other than the fact that one, Saito ended up in her room when he first spawned into the story. Two, Saito knows how to do many things that she doesn't know how to, so he's like a jack of all trades. She seems to be fascinated with jack of all trades. And three, I don't know, maybe she finds him to be cute or something. But no matter what the issue is, or maybe she's one of those type of girls that's into men who are weaker than her. I don't know what it is. But Raelza is okay. Here's the thing: there are tons of funny people in this anime, and some you would not expect to be funny. Raelza is not one of those you would expect to be funny, but she turns out to be funny because of her awkward behavior when she's around Saito. So she comes into the room, opens the door, looks at the different weapons. Saito automatically recognizes her voice. She runs out of the door. She doesn't run, but she walks rapidly out of the door, slams into the door with her armor because she's trying to get out the door so fast. Bumps into the wall and almost fall down, and then close it behind her and says, "So sorry." So she's kind of like a klutz when she's around Saito. It's hilarious. And so moving on from that, we're now into another venture with the group. And the old man is showing that it's strange. This anime is very strange. When it comes to character development, this anime is not really good with character development. However, it does its character development in increments per each I guess, transition point. So at this very moment, the old man can't remember how to do spells, and that's part of his trait or as part of his behavior of his characteristics. So that's something. So he has to kill a whole bunch of, I'm assuming that they're warlocks or trolls or whatever they are. So he can't remember. So now Saito has to remember how to recite his words to tell him so he can remember how to cast his spell. So that's something that Saito has now learned, and he's now acquired more than just a handyman's job, but he's acquired a handyman's magician's assistant's job. So now he's understanding how to use magic by magical words. So where Saito originally started in the anime at level 8, he's now is at level 10, simply because he's remembering how to assist his fellow compatriots throughout their journey. Eventually, Saito falls into a well, damages his legs, reflecting on his past and his job called Gory Gory on construction, where he got fired. And then Raelza comes to his rescue and said, "No, you don't have to worry about the damage on your leg. A Falcon and a wizard can heal it pretty good in time. And don't ever think that you're not needed because you're not the strongest. You're very dependable." Of course, Raelza would say this. She's fascinated with his character. She's never met anyone from another world before, and she always assumed that dudes are supposed to be strong. So I don't know what the reasons why she's real fascinated with Saito. To be honest with you, I have no idea. And the next episode, which is the third episode, goes into something even more character development, if you could call it that. Raelza is scared of snakes that are slimy. I don't know why. It just that is. So the wizard, Morlock, and Saito had to defeat the snake. Eventually, Saito says, "Well, we've gone on our journey for quite some time without food. We need food. Let me just cut up the snake, and then we could eat the snake later on, or whatever it is. It's a dragon or something." It's like, what? You eat the meat of giant creatures? Like, yeah. Like, and the wizard said, "Well, that's disgusting. One time I had to do it." It's like, because you guys are doing it all wrong. You don't just eat it just like that. You have to saute it, and then after you saute it, you have to marinate it a little. And after you marinate it, then you have to like Barbie it. Put it on the Barbie. Cook it, flip it, let it simmer there for a little, let it sizzle up, and that's exactly what he did. He sizzled up that meat, and in order for him to do it, he's going to need some ninja skewers. So he goes into item shop and found that the item shop lady carries some spiky little skewers, and he actually used ninja skewers for assassination to create skewers for meat. It's completely useless reason for it, but it works out to his advantage, and he's able to create skewered. I'm not sure if it's teriyaki bound. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's basically stewed beef or stewed chicken or whatever the snake is. Basically, it's nice grilled, nice seasoned, nicely herbed up, and they love it so much they actually never tasted food that was grilled before. I don't think anyone ever grills anything in this world. Maybe they cook it in a pot, but no one's ever grilled anything before. So they love it so much, they start going around like it's the greatest thing of all times. Raelza says she refused to eat it, but eventually she eats it and realizes it's great. The next episode goes into, well, it's the same episode. Saito gets his, clips something that accidentally sets off a trap. Trap has green goo. The green goo fell on Raelza, and the green goo can only melt off metal armor, which melts off all of Raelza's metal armor, which leaves her down to her clothes. And then the next scene after that goes into characters, another group of new adventures. That's why I say this is my fourth anime. Every now and again, throughout the story, it starts to become inconsistent, and I'm saying to myself, what the hell is going on? Like, shouldn't they be introducing these characters more like spread out throughout the anime? But I think the reason why they're doing it this time within this anime in comparison to the manga is because they want to get as much into the main story, dive deep into the labyrinth of the main story as possible first. And a little bit of it was also showed in the manga as well, so I'm not going to take it away from it. So you now introduce a cleric that does healing, and what is it? An elf that does like blades on her hands. I don't know the name of them yet. I don't remember from the manga either. Strange how certain characters I don't remember from the manga. But we're talking about trying to remember every damn character from every manga that I ever read, which is ridiculous. But here's another thing about this. What I would say with regards to these characters that are very different from any other character throughout this manga, or should I say one of these characters throughout, that are very different from any other character throughout this manga, and might be something that I predict to be possible and will come through, is our friend, the female cleric right here. I have this very strange feeling, and this is just a thought. I could be wrong, could be right. I have this strange feeling that she's actually going to be um, evil down the road, or she's going to play a huge part in the demise of someone, and that she's playing the fool, that she's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And yes, many people say, well, she just desires her fellow partner, or she's just a simp, or she's just into sadist type things. I don't think so. I think when a character develops sadist type behavior, is that they're attached to something that's making them lead them down this path for a reason why they're a sadist type or why they're simp type. There's a dark thing that's attached to them. And if that dark thing is awakened, that character might become someone that's a threat to our friends Saito and Raelza down the road. So keep a good eye on our friend the clerk here. I think she's going to play a huge factor with regards to the survival of her teammate and survival of other adventurers. Maybe she'll turn on them, maybe she'll help them out, but technically she won't, because as you see the smile that she has on her face right here is her telling the truth within her mind that what you're seeing on the outside that I'm behaving like is not who I really am on the inside. With that said, she started to go into her whole little, lust for blood and desire and stuff. But she's supposed to be a healer and a cleric and stuff. And then we go into our next. We go into another group of new characters. This story. See, this is why I actually like the Handyman Saito from Another World. There's so many characters in this story. It's so hilarious. We now are introduced to the king of this world. I shouldn't say of this world, of this kingdom for the moment. And the king is another hilarious one. Like, you can't take him seriously. It's like every now and again he forgets his job as the king and has to be reminded by his servants that he has to do his kingly duties. And then, but then sometimes he just is brilliant and he solves problems on the fly. That makes no sense, and he's always playing chess. And for bizarre reasons, the story has not yet to reveal, he always plays chess with the Demon King, the Demon Lord. And the Demon Lord, as you see right here, is also a hilarious. I mean, there's so many hilarious people within this story that I really don't want to put this as my number 4. I want to put this as my number 3 because it's so crazy and it's so zany, and I really want it to be my number 1. But it's not as great as Inu-Oh is, but it kind of is. But at the same time, it's not. See, let me just state it right now. My number 1 is Kanai of the Great Snow Sea. My number 2 is Inu-Oh. My number 3 is Ars no Kyoji, Giant Beasts of Ars, if you want to call it that. My number 4 is Benra right here, and my number 5 is High Card. So, based on the hook, based on the beginning story, based on character development, based on transition, based on spreading out of the story, based on the butter that's on the bread, where it's thickest, where it's most saturated into the soaking into the bread. So when you take a bite out of it, you actually taste the warmth of the bread, and you taste the butter. That's how I set things. That's how I have my first to my fifth. So this is my fourth. And getting back to that, this is became my fourth because I couldn't see those other animes down the road, those other 10 or 15 that I had to put away to the side, select my top five, because they didn't have that type of spontaneity, they didn't have that type of pizzazz, they didn't have that flair, they didn't have that ridiculousness that like the Handyman Saito from Another World have. I mean, the damn demon lord is drinking. I'm not even sure if he's drinking blood or he's drinking wine. For all I know, he could have been drinking juice out of a wine cup. So it looked like he was drinking juice when they first showed him. He was drinking juice out of a wine cup with his mouth, and he had like a cut lime in his juice, and he's sucking it out of a straw. You know, typically, if it was wine, he would be drinking the wine from the wine glass, but because he doesn't have because his tongue is so long and it interrupts his mouth, he has to use a straw. He has to use a straw in order to suck his wine or his juice or everything. I believe it's actually juice. It'll be fun if it's actually juice he's drinking at the table with the king. It better be juice. If it's juice, I'm gonna throw it up to it's gonna be my third best anime. So moving on, um, we're now seeing Saito and Raelza having this conversation about Puffum, and they're having this conversation about her because Saito is curious why she's always into gold. So the story of her backstory starts. So I would say, first two episodes were okay. You start to actually dive into character development in the third episode because that's when you really start to get true character development. Before we're just like small ticks of character development, small ticks. But here, the story starts to slow down just a bit to tell an actually emotional story of Fampan's fairy people who are actually called the Moonlight Fairies. And the reason why she's always giving gold or collecting gold is that every single day she has to make an offering of one gold coin to the moonlight sun or the moon itself. And if she does not do that, she will eventually shrink and shrink and shrink so small that you wouldn't be able to see her anymore. That she'd be smaller than a dust speck. So eventually she'll just shrink into obscurity and she wouldn't exist anymore. So in order for her to retain her size and to retain her stability of her existence and her people's existence, she has to offer one coin to the moon goddess. And the story of the moon goddess is that the moon goddess was happy with her kingdom and happy with the fairies being on it. But eventually, the fairies start to flaunt their beauty all about the place, and simply because they enjoy life and enjoy beauty. And the moon goddess eventually became jealous that they were seen as more beautiful than her. This is the typical story that you see in many folklore stories about jealousy of beauty. Or I guess it's hard to say if the moon goddess was actually jealous of the beauty. She was more upset with them flaunting their beauty all over the place. Though from the point of view of the fairies, they probably weren't flaunting it at all. It was probably just part of their nature. But the moon goddess did not see it that way. Which is very curious to me is if the moon goddess did not create the fairies, then who created the fairies? And if the moon goddess did create the fairies, then why would she be upset about flaunting them if they're part of her creation? Maybe she's bored. I don't know what it is, but that's part of the La Fampan's backstory. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting artwork at the same time too. I like the way they did it, like the silhouette and the design of this moon goddess and the fairies. And moving on from that, we now get into the story where Saito and band of merry men enter a cave, open a chest. Boom! It turns out to be a transportation chest that sucks in Saito and Raelza and transport them to somewhere else, separating them from Warlock and La Fampan. and eventually they find a giant golem. Raelza take down the golem, and with the assistance of Saito, who throw the green goop that melts iron, um, and boom, boom, lo and behold, before it actually gets defeated, it crushes Saito's chest. Eventually, Saito dies for a second time, or should I say, almost died for a second time. I'm not sure if he's 100% dead, but he's reflecting on his life, how he died. And here's the thing why I really want to throw this up in the third, but I'm keeping it at the fourth. Every single time the story starts to become serious, very serious, and becomes emotional. Saito is about to die, and Raelza is crying. He's dying, and it's a very sad situation. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it starts to become hilarious because he's reflecting on his boss, and his boss is putting his hand by his neck, saying "You're fired." But he's not doing it in the way that you're fired. He's doing it the way he's sawing his neck off by saying, you're fired. It's like all the boss has to do is saying you're fired. But in Saito's mind, his boss was elaborating it by showing that he's slicing his neck, say you're cut away from her. So this anime becomes hilarious every now and again. I just started to laugh when I saw it and I was watching the anime. I bust out laughing. Was like, all he had to do was say you were fired, man. Like, what the hell was that all about? That's extra. His boss didn't have to do all that. And then all of a sudden, Raelza whip out this magic potion and said, "Okay, I'm not going to let my man that I all of a sudden love, which Saito doesn't notice that she loves him. Um, why would he? Because she doesn't show us any emotion that at all when he, or maybe Saito's so dense he can't even tell. So she whips out this potion. I think this is a revival potion, and puts it in her mouth, and then gave him a kiss, and while making sure that the potion goes down his throat. All she had to do was pour it down his damn throat, but she had to make sure she get a little kiss in at the same time. So when people say, well, some animes like pervy old men anime, hey man, I gotta say, Raelza is kind of pervy herself too. Like, hey, didn't need all that. That was kind of extra as well. But like, she just wanted to make sure she get a kiss in before as well, get a cop a little feel or something like that. So Raelza is a little, questionable at the same time. That said, moving on in anime, we now get to the hilarity doesn't stop. The hilarity does not stop. I was really thinking about putting this in third place. The hilarity does not stop. Now all of a sudden we're talking about marriage and stuff. Eventually, people within this world, how they decide to get married is based on how many treasures you take from a dungeon or something, and how, your age group. It's like if you're young and you'll be able to attain treasure, it's more likely that you will find a suitable partner and stuff. But if, let's say for instance, since the market is now flooded with all different type of people who are able to now do treasure hunting with women, and weapons have been designed so women can carry at any time, so now they could go treasure hunting, so they don't need to be in a relationship. They could now go treasure hunting for themselves. The treasure that were typically within the dungeon are now empty, so when dudes go into look for the treasure in deep dungeons and fight monsters to get to the treasure is not empty because a bunch of chicks already found the treasure already and scored. So now they're desperate and they don't know how to get marriage proposal to people because they don't have income, because the market is now flooded with both men and women who are treasure hunters now. And so Saito said, well, this is I don't know what he says to La Fampan, and the others like, I don't know what you're all talking about. This is not something that's common to your world. This is not something that's common to your world. This is um, income depravity is I guess is common everywhere. So it's like he's like signing and said, I guess it's the same thing whatever world you come from. Like women now has the opportunities to do the same thing as men do, and marriage and all this stuff is how things are set up is the same everywhere. But it's hilarious in some ways, but like what exactly did they think was going to happen? Like the women in this world, in this Knights and Shield world, are going to stay home all the time. Like, eventually, if someone creates weapons that they could wield, they'll eventually become treasure hunters and try to go on adventures and acquire their own treasure for themselves, so they could be rich and famous or whatever. Like, it's funny as hell. I guess the people who made the anime are trying to say, like, yeah, it doesn't really matter where you go. That eventually will happen nonetheless. Eventually, if you make an orangutan super intelligent, eventually the orangutan will go out and look for a job too. Or if you make make a kid, like, teach a kid how to survive by having a accounting job, the kid would be just as good an accountant as any adult, as long as they have someone there to assist them to back off all the stupid adults who are trying to bully the kid. And it's like, as long as they have like a guardian there at all times, they could do the job just as equally as well as the adult. So it's hilarious in that sense. I really like it a lot. Then all of a sudden you see the old man Warlock inside of the marriage proposal room, trying to hook up with the actual woman that does marriage proposal for everyone else. It's like, I swear to God that the old man is probably the funniest person within the anime. So now we're moving on to our next scene. Our boy Saito is succumbed by a succubus, and then Raelza, being Raelza, liking Saito, goes crazy. And this is the first appearance of her berserk mode. She turns berserk. She goes guts and goes berserk and tries to kill the succubus. But yet now, out of the blue, yet again, um, another character pops up. It is crazy how many characters are in this anime. And this is a wizard that carries a ridiculously huge wand. And he doesn't use magic at all because this wand is so huge. Like, if he fights giants, he just clubs them over the head and they automatically fall down. And if he fights small guys, he just used the pointy end of his staff to stab multiple enemies at the same time. So it's ridiculous how funny it is. Like, it's like, why am I even trying to use magic and stress my body out when I could just make this giant weapon I have kill all the enemies all at once? I don't feel like stressing myself out. It's like, I this is one of those great animes that you cannot not watch. It's so stupid. It reminds me of Gintama more than prior anime. But I don't know. There's something about the story that's kind of off. It just goes up and down, up and down. That's why it's in the fourth place. And now we meet another character who is a ninja. Yet another character who's a ninja in episode 3. And say, well, I'm the great ninja. This, and I do ninja binding. I click people by their shadows like some Kagabushi. I think it's something that Neji does, where he holds you by your shadows. So he does something similar to that, but he tries to do it to a witch, and eventually the witch's shadow is connected towards hell, which is hilarious. And then he ends up going to hell, but then he comes back from hell, and he comes back from hell just for one thing, just to get a kiss from the witch that sent him to hell. It makes no damn sense. And then the two demons that were with him were saying, what the hell? We went all the way to hell to climb all the way to hell to get our assistance for our powers from hell, just so you could get a kiss. And they're in shock that he went through all that trouble just to return back from hell with the assistance and the power of demons, just so you could get a kiss. It makes no damn sense at all. It's ridiculous. And now we meet yet another character, and this guy is I believe he's a smithy, a weaponsmith. And what happened to Saito's pliers? Was that pliers or his wire cutters? His wire cutters, it got snapped by clipping on a dragon's teeth or a dragon's whisker. So it snapped on a dragon's whisker, which means the dragon's whisker is incredibly hard. So he went to the smithy, and the smithy, after his clippers got broken by the whiskers, he goes to the smithy, and the smithy hides behind a door because he hates being around people. He doesn't want to do smith work for anymore. He got tired of being in the incompetence of human beings. So he decides to lock himself behind a door with over 108 different locks so that you could never come in. Like, and if you try to get in, you have to open all 108 just to get inside the door. You can't break the door down because the door is sealed with magic. And you cannot bust it down because the door is incredibly thick. The only way you can get into the door is by unlocking all 108 locks. Well, unfortunately for Mr. Smithy, he didn't realize that Saito was on the job, and his specialty is locks. So he opened all 108 of them, and he entered his. He's like, "What? That's impossible!" It just goes crazy. This anime is just ridiculous. And then Saito said, "Man, this guy's great at his job. He could build anything. So he fixed my wire cutters with mithril steel. I wonder what else he could build with mithril steel. Maybe if he builds me a gun." And then Saito said to himself, "Well, I'm not gonna, no, I'm not gonna do that. If I introduce this world to guns, then it's a terrible thing. Next thing you know, they'll develop nukes and stuff." So Saito got scared, and even I got scared for a minute there. It's like, why is Saito thinking about building guns for these people? So he withdrew and took it back and said, "No, I'm going to keep that for myself. I don't want to introduce this world to that type of violence." So moving on from that, Saito remembers how he almost got run over, and how he disappeared and fell into the world, and how he landed in the room where Raelza was. And ever since then, Raelza have been following him around, and he doesn't know the reason why. In fact, he doesn't know that she's there at all. Saito is so out of it. He's into the world. He's into everything he's seeing around him. But he's not into Raelza because he's so fascinated with. I've never met someone who's so into being a handyman that he doesn't see anything around him other than his job. When he's fixing something for the old man, he's loving his job. When he's fixing something for La Fontaine, he's loving his job. When he's talking to the item shop worker, he's talking about different items for how to build things from the item shop worker. When he's talking about his depressed past that he hates, he's talking about things that he could fix and make better. Like, I've never met someone so into and so in love with his job that he's oblivious of others around him, especially from Raelza. Or maybe, here's the strange thing. He's so oblivious. Maybe he does know Raelza's into her, and maybe he doesn't want to have connection. I have no idea. I have no idea. I'm not going to jump into that. So moving on from there, we're now at the government-managed Great Labyrinth. And this is the labyrinth that everyone has been in since the beginning of the anime. And surprising to me, I thought that, well, maybe they were in other dungeons, or maybe they were in other tunnels. But they've been inside this great labyrinth for a while. How I know this? Because every time they say they come here, they have to pay money in order to enter the labyrinth, because it's government managed. So in order for you to explore and do your adventuring, you have to pay a fee in order to do it. So that's how I know they've been in this tunnel, and many of their actually treasure finding inside of this labyrinth has been within this place. So many treasure hunting, many finding of treasures have been inside this gigantic labyrinth. I'm talking this labyrinth is like the size of a freaking mountain. It's like a mountain, but nothing but tunnels and secret places and stuff. Like it's a great labyrinth, but it's a freaking mountain. And there's nothing but labyrinth and tunnels that lead to other tunnels, but it's crazy, and it'll get bonkers even later down the road, because it's not just a regular labyrinth; it's a magic labyrinth, and it's a labyrinth that leads to other realms as well, and it's a labyrinth that leads to other rooms as well. So it changes and moves. So going in here, and it's said that it's been decades since a new room has opened up within this labyrinth. And in order for this new room to have opened up, our boy Saito just happened to have stumbled onto something that just was circling around the area that led to this room. So by accident, I won't say mostly by accident, but because Saito recognized this item as a floor vacuum, an automatic floor vacuum from his world, he follows it. Typically, the people of this world wouldn't have never paid it any mind. They would think it is part of the robotic guarding system of this world, but he knew what it was. So he follows it and realized it led him to an underground, or it led him to a door or passageway, which is sealed off by a high level magic. And the only way to open it is using this high level magic. And obviously, Morlock here is a high level 81. I'm pretty sure by now he's probably level 85 or level 90 by episode 3. But maybe he's still in the 80s. But either way, it's doable by him. I'm pretty sure it's a level 80 door to open. So, boom, he opens it, and lo and behold, a new section of the labyrinth has been opened. It's been decades since a new section of the labyrinth. Yes, there have been many travelers. Yes, there have been many people. Yes, there have been many wizards that have come in here. But there have never been wizards that were with Saito before. And I'm pretty sure that no wizard or no explorer or any psychic or anything thought much about that item, that floor vacuum. So it was by chance, but also by faith, that they found this door. So that said, it says the first time in several decades the Great Labyrinth has expanded, which means the entire labyrinth of this entire mountain has expanded. Does that mean the tunnels go deeper and there are more rooms open up and do they expand? Or are there more secret locations and secret labyrinths or secret dungeons and secret monsters that are lying deep within? But this is the first time in several decades that the Great Labyrinth has expanded. So the story is going to get pretty nutty. So moving on from that, they actually called Sim, because since he is the first one to actually discover the open gate after several decades, word got out quick, and I mean quick, that this new expanded door has been discovered. So everyone and their mother, after so many decades, showed up. Everyone. I'm talking Mr. Heavy Tank Guy, and Sword Girl and her magic assistants. Axe Girl and her magic assistants. Brawler Girl and her healer, and her suspected healer, who might be actually a villain. Mr. Big Mage Guy, Big Staff Mage Guy. And then there's, I didn't elaborate on these three. Basically, they're the goof of all goofs. They're like the worst of all hunters. One is a cute girl that doesn't know much of anything about hunting. One is a guy that pretends to be a hero, but he's actually, they only selected him because he was handsome. And the third is the guy at the back, the third one wearing the healer outfit. He's only with them because he has connections towards his family that got him within the crew. So they're like, I believe they're the worst of all the hunters or all the adventurers. That said, that's the end of that. And we're moving on to the last of the stories. And just to make sure I double check on that, High Card, I believe, is the last of these stories. Oh, nope, not even. High Court is not the last of these stories. High Court is now what I would consider the fifth of these stories. This is my number 5. Whereas Handyman Saito from Another World is my number 4. My number 5 is High Card, and High Card represents my number 5. So here, this is the next story, High Card, and High Card is exactly, I'll tell you as it goes. So at the beginning of High Card, we see a girl stealing a package of stuff, and she's running away from a bunch of guards. They're shooting at her, blah blah blah. They corner her, and then all of a sudden she put her hands up, and then these things, magical like explosive TNT, are popped up onto the wall, like many of them, and then they explode. Boom, she escapes. Helicopter comes down to rescue her, and all of a sudden she waves her hand, and all of a sudden something pops up into the air, like it just manifests out of nowhere and turns into a huge rocket, and the rocket crashes into a bunch of people, blows up, blah 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 blah. But then for no reason, the voice of the sky opens up and a voice is heard, and whatever was within the case goes straight up into the sky. All 52 or 50, 51, depending on. No, she was using one. She was using a card. Well, it could be anywhere from 30 to 50 cars went up into the air, because depending on who were using cars during the beginning intro of this anime, these are all cards, and these cards went up into the air, and they all went in different directions. And so the king of this country, King Forlan, calls this guy named Theodore, and Theodore is the president of the High Card Society. And the High Card Society is a group of businessmen slash assassins type individuals who are sent to require and retrieve cards from corrupt individuals who would use them for ill will. So at this point, there are two main, based on the story, there are two main factions so far. There's one called the Klondikes, which is a mafia family, and then there's other, which is known as the High Card, which aren't a mafia family or any family. They're just an organization organized or kept, or should I say, to be hired to be retrievers or assassins in order to collect these cards that are trying to be collected by the Klondikes, the mafia family. If the Klondike collect all of these cards, they become the most powerful thing throughout all of Japan. And moving on from that, we now see Shield Spada County. Now, Shield Spada County is the main city, the capital of Spada. Spada is like a small little continent, or a small little, I would say a small little state. And the capital of that state is called Shield. Now, this is where our main boys are going to be, the main high card are going to be. And they're going to be there for quite some time. So, for right now, what I will do, I'm going to split up this video, since I don't want this to go on too long, into two sections. So the first one of this video is me talking all the way from the first three anime, and the last video is going to be me talking from the next. Well, maybe I should just end it off as quickly as possible. I think I'll get through it as quickly as possible. So we're here in Shield headquarters, or should I say Shield capital, and we meet an interesting young man, and this interesting young man is our hero of the story. And let me see if I got his name right here. Come on, high card. All right. No, it's not Chris. It's not Chris. Chris is not the hero. Finn. All right, so we're on Finn. So for right now, I'm going to push forward through this a little bit faster. I don't want this to go beyond 2 hours, but it might actually go. So I'm going to push through this faster. So Finn is a thief. Basically, he's a thief. He happens to has a high card. How he got the high card, I don't know. So he's a thief, and he's stealing stuff so he could pay rent for his friend or his brother, or whoever this person is that's sitting across from this guy with glasses. And they have to pay to keep their place. And he's standing outside the door. He heard what's going on, so he needs money. So he goes to, he typically plays with the orphan kids. So he goes to this pawn broker in order to pawn off stuff to get more money. Pawn broker said, "Get the hell out of here. You don't got anything I want, but I'll take that card." No, he said, "I'm not giving you the card. That's my special lucky number 2 card, 2 of spades." He said, "Okay, fine. I'm going to go to this place, a poker casino. I'm going to do my luck there." Boom. He starts winning a lot, but eventually you run into a guy who has also a card as well. He didn't know this guy has a card, so this guy swindled him, beats him at everything. He has 3 of diamonds. Boom, wins. Eventually, they both got summoned inside of a private room by a bunch of mafia people are in charge of the casino. Who says, "How are you guys winning so much?" Blah 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 blah. If you don't tell us how you're winning, we're gonna kill you. You got an interesting glove right there. Give us that glove, we'll kill you. Blah blah blah. Someone else shows up inside of the room. He said, "Who the hell are you?" It's like, "Nah, I'll be taking that card." It's like hell you will. And this guy's name is Bobby Ball or something like that. And what he does is that if he grabs any part of your body or he grabs anything, he turns it to nothing but candy balls, and then he could throw it at you. Yes, it's bizarre, and he could throw it at you and he kill you. It's like he grabbing. It's like his hand is a gun, and when he throws it, it's like nothing but bullets. So he'll kill you straight on the spot. So he's a high card user. He's trying to acquire the 3 of diamonds card. He's trying to acquire our boy's Finn's card as well. So he comes into the room and says, "Give me the card or else I'll kill you." Another guy shows up into the room, Mr. 5 of Hearts. His name is Chris, and he works for High Card. Now, he's not interested in Finn yet. In fact, he doesn't know if Finn has a card yet, but he's here to acquire the card from the old man, and he's here to stop Mr. Bobby Ball here from acquiring that card. Now, Bobby Ball here works for the Klondikes. And the Klondikes, like I said, a mafia family are trying to rule all of Sparta, which isn't going to happen on the watch of the High Card. So the Chris from the High Card and the Klondike guy, Bobby Ball, gets into a fight. Eventually, our boy Finn stole the card, the 3 of diamonds from the dead man's corpse. Yes, the old man got himself killed. He's dead. And so Bobby Ball here goes after Finn. In the car, chases after him. Eventually, Bobby Ball gets killed by Finn because he doesn't realize that Finn also carries card as well. I didn't realize that Finn had a card as well. And Finn card turns into a gun, and then he tries to shoot him with his throws different gummy balls or whatever or marbles at him, and it didn't work because Finn has a special type of card. It's not just can turn into a gun, but it's lock on perfect, like laser sight. Like it doesn't matter where you throw anything or launch anything at him. It locks on and it's accurate as hell. So he's basically done for the. I think he got his hand blown off. I'm not sure if Bobby Ball is completely dead, but the anime is basically trying to show that he's dead. But from what I saw, is he got his hand blown off. Moving on from that. Before that happens, Bobby Ball kind of killed Chris here, the 5 of Hearts, by shooting one of those balls into his head, one of those marbles into his head. And I thought he was dead because the strange thing about this anime is that anyone could die in this anime. Anyone. Who you think is the hero, who you think is the villain, anyone could die in this anime. And so I'm 100% sure Chris was dead. I was like, okay, so Chris is not the hero of the story. So who is the hero? Finn? Okay, so Finn is about to die by this guy because this guy killed Chris, and Finn doesn't have the skills to defeat Mr. Bobby Ball. Well, apparently Finn has luck on his side and was able to stop him by himself. But lo and behold, Chris is not dead. Chris's high card special is to revive himself from death. So if Chris was to get his hand blown off like some Deadpool style stuff, or get his neck twisted, or his jaw, or his body blown to pieces, as long as his brain is still functioning, as long as an aspect of his brain, like let's say his entire brain cavity, as long as his brain is inside his brain and it's not completely obliterated, Chris can fix part of his body back together all over again. As long as there's consciousness and the ability to function, his brain, he can fix his body. So if you shoot him in the head point blank, it won't kill him. As long as he's known that he's still alive, as long as there's an aspect of him knows that he's alive, he'll come back to life. So he's like a living zombie. So moving on from that, Chris captures Finn, takes him back to the High Card headquarters. They tell him, Chris says, listen, give me a card or I'll blow your head off. But then he's interrupted by the butler, who looks like a butler, but he's not a butler. He's in charge of them. His name is Bernard. And Bernard tells him, listen, you don't know what these Haikar does. They're very dangerous. The King Forlan told us we got to capture all of this because the Klondikes, the mafia organization want all this. You're in deep shit now, kid. You're up a paddle without up shit's creek without a paddle, and either join us or we take it, and then you'll see how far you will go when the mafia come knocking at your door. It's like he's thinking about his friend who has to pay bills and stuff, all the stuff, blah blah blah. He's like, all right, I'm in, but what's going on? Tell me a little bit more. So Bernard tells him like, listen, there's Sparta, and then there's pole stick, and then there's lozenge, and it's strange to say it's called lozenge. It's weird, and then there's Selfin. That's SIL. It's not showing here, but it's SILHIUM, a Selfin. And these are different territories owned by very powerful individuals. Now, Sparta is not owned and managed and owned by Haikar. I would say the king Forlan is the one that's ruling all of Sparta. I believe maybe each territory is ruled by either a king or a president or someone of that equal power. So in Sparta, a king is ruling. Maybe in Polstic, a president is ruling. Maybe in Selfin, another king is ruling. And maybe in Alazenge, a dictator is ruling. Who knows? But regardless of what's going on, all I can say is moving forward is the story so far is great. Development of characters so far, not so much. Character development, not so much. How I got to say it with regards to this, the story of this anime is what's moving me in the direction to think that it has high possibilities. Not so much the characters, not so much what their powers are. More of the overall story, the overall narrative of the world. The world setup is good. The world story is good. Not so much the character stories, not so much the powers that they have, not so much the use of cards to represent this story. I know the story is called High Cards. It's not the high cards that's selling the story. It's the world and what's going on in it. So the world itself is what's maintaining this. So moving on from that, Bernard says, listen, since the president wants you on the team, from now on you're going to chill with Finn. With Chris. And Chris is in charge of sales. And he says, sales, yes, he's a salesman. It's basically, he's into suit sales and selling cars and stuff. And on the side, our operation is a automobile car service called Polsig. And so it's a front for what we really do. But it's a real thing. It's not typically a front. It's a real automobile company, a real snazzy automobile company, and it's owned by a real important guy, Theodore, and his family. So it's not like it's just created to be created to hide what we do. It's been part of the business for quite some time, maybe before even High Card existed, and also the other members of the High Card were introduced. The accountant was introduced, and I believe the tech guy was also introduced as well. I don't remember their names, but they're not important at the moment for right now. What's most important is Chris, Finn, Bernard, and the Klondikes. So Finn is with Chris. Chris is telling him, well, you're going to do two things when you're with me. You're going to be killing a lot of people or trying to stop them, arrest them, or you're going to be selling stuff, selling cars and selling clothes. So you have to know how to do these things, because that's going to be what you're going to be doing under my apprenticeship. So you have to look the part. So it takes him to a nice little place with different ties, showing how he got to look, what he got to dress, and what he got to wear. So after that is over, they go to a nice little bar where they have a nice little conversation. And eventually a guy is picking on another guy. Chris breaks it up, says, if you don't get out of here, I'll break your arm, blah, blah, blah. The restaurant guys apologize. They say, I'm sorry for all the trouble it caused. Chris says, no problem. Finn says, no problem. Finn goes back home. Tells him, like, listen, I work for this snazzy organization, Polstick Automobiles. So, Polstick Automobiles or Posh Automobiles. Um, I'm going to be working for them for quite some time now. This is my job. He doesn't tell him that he actually works for High Card, but he doesn't want him to know that. So I'll be bringing some money in from now on. He said, that's great. So you don't have to worry about, losing the place. So early in the morning, around 5:30, Finn gets up. Doesn't really want to. Summoned by Chris by honking his horn. He said, come on, we got work to do. So Chris wakes up, goes in the car, still wearing his same jacket. And this time it's not a selling job. This time you got to stop this guy. It's a big bruiser type of guy. But then Finn realizes that the bruiser guy looks very much like the guy from the restaurant, just bigger. And so he stops him. But technically he didn't stop him. Chris stopped him and said, screw it. Chris rams the guy straight, slams straight into the guy. And then the guy falls with Chris in his vehicle into the lake. Now, he doesn't know how to, I guess his power shuts off once he hits water. So once he hits water, his size shrunk down. He got arrested. And that's it for that. That's the end of that episode. Moving on from that, Theodore is sitting on the phone here talking to Bernard and says, listen, I want to make sure this guy Finn is not a liability, so make sure to get him squared away along with other people. We need to produce results for King Fortland. Otherwise, we're going to be getting the short end of the stick. And plus, if you're not sharp, the Klondikes will eventually get you killed. So you have to be sharp all the time. Okay, so fire him if he's not that good. So that was the end of episode 2. Episode 3 started with a kidnapping of a boy in broad daylight. So Finn sees this, goes to rescue this boy who's now held at knife point. The kidnappers don't know who this boy is. I do. He's bored and he's not interested in being kidnapped, and it's kind of hilarious how the kidnappers were stressing about kidnapping him while he is just lazily accepting the kidnapping. Eventually, Finn rescues him, stops the kidnappers, and brings him into a nice little bar. And the boy says, "Well, why do you think I need to be saved by you?" Finn says, "Don't be like that. I just rescued you. This is my thanks for rescuing a human being." It's like the kids just get lost. Eventually, Finn gets upset and says, "You know what? You're nothing but a brat. Someone should teach you some manners. This is how you treat people who just save you." The kid gets upset, decides to. It's actually hilarious. He gets upset, decides to pull out a chair, sits down at the chair, looks at Finn and says, "Listen, let me explain to you what you've just did. You damage a fire hydrant. You cause a ruckus within the street. You damage property. You endanger the life of civilians. A list of different things. So, and you try to play the hero as well, which could have got you killed and me killed." And so he says, "Well, how do you like that?" And eventually, the two guys that got arrested after Finn of them stopped them, got busted out by someone who also knows how to use a high card. This woman knows how to use a high card. So eventually they'll get her high card. But before that, she busted them out of prison. Finn and I'll just call him by his name. The anime doesn't say his name right now, but I'm going to say his name. His name is Leo. So Finn and Leo has this nice little conversation. Finn says, "You know what, stop being such a sourpuss. You're right about certain things about me. I shouldn't pretend like I know you or your father or any of the stuff. And I'm pretty sure the reason you behave the way you do it, there's a reason why you do this." So he went to get him some hot dogs. For some reason, Leo decided to warm up to him because of this. I guess maybe Leo doesn't get a hot dog every now and again. Doesn't go out to eat. He's typically supposed to eat certain food. Or maybe Leo doesn't have any friends. Eventually they sat down, have a nice little conversation between each other, and Leo eventually started to warm up to Finn. Still doesn't like him though. And eventually they ride the train at Finn's request, and lo and behold, the woman with the with the card that could turn to flames, starts to heat up the place, captures both of them, put them inside a warehouse, and then Chris has to come back and save them again, which is typically the normal thing that would happen because Finn is not good at his job. So, but this time Chris, after coming to save the day, whips out a briefcase, throws it towards Leo's leg, and in that briefcase is nothing but $100 bills. I mean, millions of dollars of $100 bills. And so the woman and as well as the kidnappers thought that they're rich, but they don't realize that Leo is actually a high card user as well. So his thing is no dollars or something. His little saying is no dollars, no more dollars. And so what he does is he can turn money into any type of weapon or into any type of thing that he can. So anytime he uses card and he touches any form of money, no matter what type it is, he can turn it into any type of object or any type of weapon that he wants, as long as it's money. I'm not sure if it works with anything else. Eventually, the story ends with episode 3, and we found out that Leo is actually the son of the president of the Posh Automobiles. So he's basically the senior to all of them. Every employee of the high card, including Bernard, have to answer to Leo. So yeah, Finn didn't know that, and but Chris knew that, but Chris didn't tell Finn about it. So Finn is kind of pissed off about it, and eventually Leo drags Finn and Chris by the tie and says, "Listen, if you screw up this many times, you get reprimanded." Of course, Bernard is in the background laughing because he's never seen Leo behave this way before. Leo is typically, firm, uptight. This is never personal. Never grabbed anyone by a shirt. Never behaved outwardly or interacted physically with someone. So Bernard likes this because now Leo finally can have someone to convey in if she needs to speak to, even if he doesn't like them that much. So Leo's a strange guy. So moving on from that those were my 4 animes. And yes, they were in different sections, but I did stated what order they were in. Ars no Kyojin, or Kyojo, which is Giant Beasts of Ars, was my number 2. My number 3 was Benria. I mean, not my number 3 wasn't Benria. My number 3 was oh geez, I have to go back again. My number 2 was Ars. My number 3 was no. See, I'm getting it wrong. My number 2 was Inu-Oh. My number 3 was Ars no Kyojin. My number 4 was Benria, or Handyman Saito. And my number 5 was High Card. So those were my top 4. Not my number 1, my top 4. I'll say it again. My number 2 was Inu-Oh. My number 3 was Ars, Giant Beasts of Ars, my ARS. My number 3 was Handyman Saito from Another World, and my number 4 was High Card. Now moving on to my number 1, which would make it a top 5. My number 1 is this anime you see right here. And this was created by the guy who made Knights of Sidonia, Niles, Nihei. I keep saying Niles. His name is the animator called Nihei. And he was a person, he's actually my third best animator, or is it my 4th? He's my 3rd best animator, because after I saw Biomega way back in the days, like 10 or 12 years ago, yeah, after I got hooked on Biomega and Blam, I never turned back. So he's either my 3rd or my 4th, one or the other. So this is the guy that made Blam. This is the guy that made Knights of Sidonia. This is the guy that made Biomega. And those were very dark, very bleak. And what Kanai of the Great Sword Sea is the opposite of those. Yes, there's still dark themes, but everything you've ever seen in anything that this guy has ever done has always been use of dark over light more than anything. Everything was bleak more than anything. It was always darkness, more emphasis on dark, whereas in this anime is more emphasis on light. So he's kind of done a reverse. And yes, there were many scenes where they're in Sidonia there were many bright scenes, but mostly everything were covered in like dark silhouettes. Here it's mostly everything is bright and very vague darkness. Or every now and again, like the darkest thing that you will find within this anime has to do with the atmosphere. That's it. And maybe some deep shadows on trees and stuff. But everything else is bright. The outfits are bright. The people, what people are wearing are bright. The locations are bright. Because it's called Kanai of the Great Snow Sea. So everything must be related to snow. The outfits that they wear to resist the snow climates must be bright to resist snow, to represent the type of world that they're in. The snow, if you're going to put snow as a sea, that the sea is made out of snow, then everything around it can't be dark. It has to somewhat complement or somewhat have a harmony with regards to that snow. Otherwise, it would look off. So that's what this anime is, and that's why this is my #1 anime. First, the artwork is the one that's in top tier and compared to every other art I've seen with regards to my list. Second, the story is very good. It's not the greatest, but it's very good. It's better than other stories that I've stated within this anime list. Third, um, the acting is good, very good, very good acting. The acting in all the animes were good, but the acting in here is very good as well. Fourth, it's more of an emotional journey in this than more than any other animes. Yes, there are losses in the other animes, but this felt more like a grounded type of emotional loss because this is a war story. This is a story of two factions against each other, and a guy just trying to make his people survive while these two warring factions are against each other. It's not the same as in High Card where you have mafia against the the High Card society, or in Giant Beasts of Ars, you have an imperial government and they're trying to make sure the beast doesn't destroy their, versus things versus each other. Here, you actually feel like it's more grounded, that it's actually more about survival of the fittest more than anything, rather than it's not truly related towards magic or the use of magic. It's more like natural things that you find within the world that you use in order for you to survive based on more mechanics. Maybe past episode 3, magic will be introduced within this anime. So far, I have not seen it yet. There have been some mystical things I've noticed. And of course, the anime does say that there's a sage in it. So maybe past episode 3, maybe to episode 4 and episode 5 when they arrive, there will be an introduction of magic. So far, that has not been introduced, and I like that. You don't need to introduce things quickly. You could flesh it out slowly in paces. That's why this is a #1. So moving on, I'll go straight into it. I don't want this to go into a 2 hour and 30. I think I could do this one in 15 minutes. So the guy that you see right here, his name is Kanai, Kaina, Kania, Kaina, yeah, there it is, Kaina. So Kaina of the Great Storm Sea. So at the beginning, I thought Kaina was a woman. No, Kaina's actually a dude. So he's a dude, and what he's doing is he's fishing for a bug, and this bug is a specific type of bug. It's a queen bug, and she carries eggs on her back. And eventually, in this world, for bizarre reasons, they eat bugs and they eat the eggs from the bugs because that's part of the nutrients of this world. It's like eating chicken eggs or something. It's the same thing. But there are no chickens, there are bugs. Another strange and bizarre thing about this world is that there are two territories, typically on Earth or the standard of society. You would live your life on the ground. In this world, there are two levels. There's the society that lives high above the atmosphere, or a regular atmosphere, but I guess not beyond the atmosphere, but high above the clouds. And then there are those who live below the clouds on the ground. And so it is stated that what you see here, as presented here, is not glass, it's not ice, it's not, I don't know what it is, but it's not ice, it's not glass, it's something. It's more like nectar. It's like sap, but it's rock hard, solid sap. It's not sap that could crack if it becomes too brittle due to the cold climate. It's kind of like a sap that's made to live within cold climate only, and be as solid as stone on the ground. It's like if you were to try to stomp stone on the ground, you would break your legs because you can't stomp through stone on the ground. You can't stomp through brick on the ground. You'll break your legs before that. And what I also like about it is that it actually is also transparent. So not only can you not stomp through it, and it's like brick or like stone on the ground, it's also something you could transparent. So you could see directly below the from all the way high up in the sky all the way to where the clouds are below. So it's a very interesting story. It's very fascinating. However, the tree is slowly dying, and as the tree dies, tears within this atmosphere, or within this mass, or this plasma, whatever it is slowly fading away, and there are ripples, there are small little holes, and those small holes are fixed by these beetles, these bugs, and they put it back together. It's like nectar and honey, like bees like create nectar. It's like nectar, and it's very strange. But yeah, this is an example of it, and it's like one big giant nectar that's covering the entire atmosphere, and it's created by these trees, and it's very hard, and it's like plastic, but it's not like plastic, and it's like it's like the atmosphere. I would say like it's very much like a composite of uh, it's hard to describe it. So it's basically see-through bricks or see-through stone, but it's high above the atmosphere, and it cannot break no matter what you do, no matter what you try, because it's thick. I mean, ridiculously thick, like ridiculously thick. And it only breaks now and again due to nutrients that the tree is not feeding towards the entire atmosphere itself. So that said, moving on from that, you then see the first group of people who are living within this tree, around the tree and in the tree, group of 4 people, and Kaina himself. Now, originally there were many villages who live in many trees, and eventually most of those trees have faded away now and shattered. And so Kaina and his group of people are the last of their kinds that are living up within this atmosphere high above the earth and the clouds below, or if it's even earth that they're on. Obviously, it's not earth. Whatever this planet is and this place is. Moving on from that, Kaina's telling that he captured the bug, blah, blah, blah. Moving on from that, Kaina then goes to see the sign keeper, and the sign keeper is a billboard guy. He keeps billboards from the past that people used to write on for a long time ago. Kaina says, "Why do you keep those billboards? Are they don't do anything?" He says it's a representation of history, of what people used to say and communicate with each other in order to do certain things. So it's how I keep the past alive, which makes me think that this is Earth, if he's talking about billboards. But this is a type of Earth that probably is thousands upon thousands of years into the future, because there's no way in hell, if this is Earth, that any type of magic or tree would grow out of the ground and create like a silhouette that's as hard as stone to cover an entire damn planet. So if this truly is Earth, this has to be like 10,000 years or 13,000 years into the future or some craziness like that. So Kaina is here, and the Silent Keeper is here, and they're talking about past. And he told them of the last of the villages that existed that before their came traveling towards their villages, traveling towards their village. The last person from the last village that exists that gave him his signpost from his village before he died, so on and so forth. Now, story moves on to something else, away from Kaina, away from the people from the sky, into the people who are below the clouds and below on the ground. And we now see the snow sea for itself. And truly, it truly is a sea of nothing but snow. Apparently, something happened, if this truly is Earth, something happened to Earth where there's no more sea. And it's just nothing but snow. So if this is Earth, there is no more sea. It's nothing but snow. And if it's not Earth, then it's bizarre that people don't travel like on water anymore. They travel using these different strange looking creatures that look like they look kind of like dolphins, but they're not dolphins. I don't know, something, if something had happened to Earth, something happened to Earth, something happened to Earth sometime into the future, that new type of creatures start to exist, that new things start to exist, and now that there's no more water, there's only a sea of nothing but snow. That's if this is Earth. If this is not Earth, this is a snow sea, and they're gliding on snow sea using these creatures, and they're trying to capture this balloon right here. It's not really a balloon, but it's something balloon-like, and this balloon-like structure here comes down every, I don't know, every few years or a few months, and it goes right back up again. So based on the conditions of the atmosphere, or based on the nature of its existence, this bubble type, like air, inflated air bubble, or air pod, or air spore, goes up high into the atmosphere, way above the clouds, way above where Kaina and them live. And every now and again, it comes all the way back down, all the way to Earth, all the way close towards the snow sea. I think it might be a standard thing that it does. It might have something to do with atmosphere, but many of these type of spore pods, like helium balloons, goes up and goes down. Maybe it has to do with the atmosphere, and as it comes down, it requires the temperature and heat from the atmosphere below the atmosphere for it to increase and go back up again. However it is, it just goes up and down, up and down. So during this period, right now, this one came down, and it's been a couple of months, and now these guys are after it, because why? They need to go find a sage. Their country called Atlan is having problems with water, and yes, it's very strange. I won't even get into it. How could they be having problems with water where there's snow all the way around? Apparently, the snow in this world is not something that you could just boil in hot water and distill and then make it a day and say, bam, it's water. No. Apparently, you try to distill this water and then turn the snow into water and drink it, you might actually die or something. The snow sea is not something that you drink. So, the water is separate from the snow sea. That's another strange thing about this anime I really have to get into. You cannot think like, oh yeah, it's just snow, I'm going to melt it and distill it, everything will be fine. It doesn't work that way in this anime. So they're after this pod, and they have this little basket here to attach to it, like like an air balloon, and they have to capture it, and before it goes back up again. So they're intercepted by a couple of bad guys, and the bad guys here call Vollenheim or something like that, Vollenha, and Atlan is their true enemy. So there are two warring factions here, one Vollenha and Atlan, and eventually there were many factions before, but Vollenha became very powerful and eliminated everyone and acquired their water. And I believe it's only Atlan and a few other countries that can still stand up against them. So here, Vollenha is after the air balloon because they want to see what the people from Atlan are up to, or maybe they want to go back up into the atmosphere and see how they could find the sage himself. But regardless, they fight off the people from Vollenha, and amongst these people who are with them, the Atlan soldiers, the one in white, is the princess. Strange that the princesses go on an adventure with them and then all of a sudden they get attacked. But hey, this is an anime. This is how it works. Eventually, the princess would get attacked somewhere. So if it wasn't here, it would have been somewhere. Could have been, when she met Kaina. It could have been later on in the story. But at this moment, to progress the story forward, she's here. She's been attacked by Valha. Her men get killed. Eventually, one of her soldiers or her bodyguard soldiers knock her into the balloon or into the basket, which is now hooked towards the balloon, and it goes all the way up, or the spore balloon, and it goes all the way up. He eventually gets killed, but she goes all the way up, and it goes way past, way high into the air. And this spore balloon could have actually went all the way up and not go through that hole, and could have been blocked off and went and hit the crust of another atmosphere like area and tapped on the ceiling, and could have been floating all the way in the ceiling and stayed there all this time. But for the hell of the sake of the story, it just passed through that open hole that kind of saw at the beginning. And eventually he saw that there was someone inside of the basket, and goes to rescue the girl that was inside the basket, pull her out, and she came out. So what I've been assuming is the reason why this has happened is has to do with the fact that when she wakes up, she speaks about something called the light. And the light is something that she saw when she was a kid. And it was shaped like a beam of light that guided her towards seeing the forest that was in the sky. And so I believe it's not coincidence that the spore, which could have just tapped onto the ceiling of the atmosphere and never moved, that it was intended for it to go through that hole. And it was intended for Kaina to find her. If not for Kaina to find her, but for the people who were high above there, for it to find her, and or for her to go towards the sage. Maybe that was the intention. Maybe the sage summoned her towards her, but kind of intercepted it. But I don't know. I don't know how the story is going yet, so I'm proceeding forward. So they find her. She's with them. She's with the old folks, and with Kaina. She wakes up and she starts to speak to them about her Atlan and about the war and the scarcity of water. And they're having the same trouble too with regards to the divine tree. And this tree is called the Spire Tree. And it's not really the divine tree, it's called the Spire Tree. And they're having troubles as well. And there are many villages that are high up within the spires that had many trees. Those trees have fallen. Those villages have gone to waste, or I wouldn't say waste, have been destroyed due to lack of water and due to the tree collapsing. And so they're having the same problem with their tree, and so they need to find solutions as well. So it's at this moment that the princess, she says her name is Ririha. Let me see if I'm making sure this is correct. I have to make sure that name is accurate. Kinda. Yeah, Ririha. Okay, so Ririha, Princess Ririha, says, I gotta get back down. It says there's no way to get back down. You have to, in order to get back down, you have to use another balloon to get back down. But that doesn't come around probably in months or stuff. She can't wait that long. So she's stuck there, and she tells them about the story of them lacking water in her kingdom. And this is a representation of her kingdom that's stuck to the foot of the tree. They basically get sapped from out of the tree, but the snow sea is increasing. So by the year, or maybe even by the months, the snow sea is increasing. I don't believe it'd be by months, because if it was by months, these people would probably already been dead. So by the year, the snow sea increases. So they're having problems with water shortage and environment issues. So, and also with Volhai, if that's the proper way of saying it. Valg, Valgan. Yeah, so I'm saying it all one. Valgan. So yeah, that's issues with Valgan as well. They're enemies within this war. So moving on from that, the sign keeper then says, well, if she really wants to get down, we need to give her something and give you something. This is an attached gear for climbing. It said people in ancient past used to use this when they used to climb things or descended from things, and pulley hooks. So yeah, moving on from that, and that's the way they were able to get down from the giant spire tree onto the snow sea floor. They climbed down. So eventually, Kaina and Riri, Princess Riri, or Ririha, says their goodbyes, and they descended the Spire Tree. Now, it's at this point the story becomes kind of depressing because once they leave these old folks and the Signkeeper, it's more likely that they're never going to see them again because the water is a very shortage of the water. These individuals probably have a year most of water before they're all dead and before their tree collapses and falls to the earth. So this is very strange anime. Why would people stay up here? The thing is, they're staying up here because they don't have anywhere to go, and they never. The thing is about the people who live in the sky. Um, they the people who live in the sky never venture to the bottom realm below the clouds because they don't believe that there's anything below the clouds. For centuries, there are two different type of people that existed on this planet: those who live high above the clouds and those who live below the clouds. And neither one knew there were civilizations that existed. It was just myth. So even if they were to travel below the clouds, they would assume that they would be going to their deaths if they did. So they would prefer to take their chances with dying the standard way and wait for their apocalypse or travel to other lands or travel to ways across the huge maple canopy of the atmosphere after their tree falls, because that's what they do. That's what villagers do. After their location, their homes fall and their tree fall, they just travel over the canopy to a different location. That said, it's likely that they're not going to survive past probably the first season of this anime, and if they do, that's good. Um, but kind of would have to solve what the water issue is if these individuals are going to survive later on. Moving on, we see new characters, kind of a general type looking for Princess Ririha, and other troops coming on as backups after the first group of them got killed off by the Valgehan. And then as Kaina and Princess Ririha are descending the tree, another tree in a very, very, very distant place falls. And they keep descending and say, okay, this world is collapsing. Not only the people from the above the clouds are dying, but the people below the clouds are dying. So they have to find a sage. But in order for them to find a sage, it's kind of physically impossible because no one knows where he is. So she basically say, well, since I cannot find him, I have to return to my people. So kind of decides to go with them, and they're descending the tree, and kind of is having a conversation with her, being like a guide and stuff, to make sure she gets home safe. And interestingly enough, they start to develop this little feelings towards each other. I'm not sure that much on Kaina's part, but well, actually no. I believe Kaina's starting to have kind of feelings towards her more than anything. Or no. Let me correct myself. Princess Ririha is starting to have kind of feelings towards Kaina more than anything. Kaina's just kind of like have a crush, more like a crush. Not even a crush. It's like he's never been around a girl before, so he doesn't know what a little girl looks like. or a girl looks like. But Princess Ririha has been around boys before, so she understands. But he's never, so he's just fascinated by her presence. Whereas she understands what boys are, and she understands that boys like girls and stuff. So she understands the notion. So she's kind of having a crush on him. He just doesn't know what to do with his emotions at the moment. So moving on from that, they both travel down, and they see the the light that she was talking about in the dreams when she was young. And then they see it, and they see that it's there again, and it's like a guiding light. So they decide, okay, so we're on the right path. So they keep moving down some more. Eventually, they get hungry. Eventually, kind of decides to offer her, more insects to eat. She's like, no, no, thank you. I'm not interested in insects. I'll find some other type of food to eat, maybe some fruits or stuff they brought, but not the insects. Moving on from there, she eventually says, calls Kaina by his name. I said, oh, this is the first time he actually called me by my name. It's like, and then she started to have this little blushing thing because she's kind of starting to like him and stuff. I don't think she's never liked a boy before, but I don't know if she's ever tried to like a boy before because I don't understand the past of the story before. So if there could have been people she was meant to marry to, she could have been other boys when she was younger, but I don't know the story of this overall arcing world yet. All I know is Kaina's never been around a girl before. That's for a fact. His mother and his father died when he was very young, and he was raised by the elders. So in his case, he merits a less interesting background than the princess does, because he only has those four people for him, while the princess has tons of people around the royalty and others as well as friends, probably lots of friends and families and people who support her, as well as lots of enemies she's encountered, whereas Kaina's pretty much had nobody. So they're an odd couple, both of them. So they finally make it to the ground, and there are two paws right there, and blam, blam, blam. Story moves on. She's by the snow sea now. She made it to the bottom of the tree. They're finally where they are, and then all of a sudden, our boys here on the Atlant side decide to fire at Volkenheim Valgans, because the Valgans are now intercepting Princess Ririha, because they see her as she was descending down to the snow sea, and they're trying to intercept her and kidnap her and stuff. They came to the rescue, and before long they escaped by jumping off. Otherwise, they would have been captured by them, by the bad guys, the enemy soldiers. So, kind of has this idea of, okay, so there's a way we could get away from. We jump onto each of those little floating pads, floating bubbles, or floating spores, and it will take us to where we need to go for a period of time. So as long as they're not ascending, that they're descending, then we have no problem. So they jump onto one that was descending. So as they're going down even further, they manage to escape the enemy. And this is where the story of Kaina of the Great Sorcery come to an end. And this is where my anime list for January of 2023 comes to an end as well. So to recap, best anime of January 2023 to me so far can be either one or two. Kaina of the Great Sorcery, Kania, I keep saying Kanai, Kania of the Great Sorcery, or Inu-Oh. If it's not Kania of the Great Sorcery, it would be Inu-Oh. Now, if it's not Inu-Oh, then it's Kaina. So those are the only two I could think of to be my number one, if I'm going to select the number one. So there are 5 animes in total. There's Kaina of the Great Sorcery, that's my number one. My number 2 is Inu-Oh. My number 3 is Giant Beasts of Ars. My number 4 is the Handyman Saito from Another World. And my number 5 is High Card. All of these animes have possibilities. High Card less than the others, but all have possibilities. Maybe not so much High Card, now that I think about it, but if it's going in the direction I think it's going in, like a James Bond type, Minority Report type thing, as well as intrigue and espionage and stuff, it might actually last and stand the test of times. It could stand the test, possible. But the ones I know for a fact that are going to stand the test of times can be either one of the three that I've just said, and one of the top three. Kania of the Great Sea, of the Great Snow Sea. 2, Inu-Oh, and 3, Giant Beasts of Ars. Either one of these three. Either one of these three. If you don't like Giant Beasts of Ars, you think it's pretentious and stuff, then go for Inu-Oh. And if you don't like, well, rock musicals, you find it annoying, then go for Kaina of the Great Snow Sea. So each of these three are different. One is a performing arts type of anime. The first, my number one, Kaina of the Great Snow Sea, Kaina of the Great Snow Sea, is actually a war anime mixed in with exploration and a kind of a love story in there. And the third is also kind of a war, but it's not a war against two people. It's a war against monsters versus humans, kind of like Attack on Titan and meets Final Fantasy. So if you like Final Fantasy type world, Giant Beasts of Ars will be the one you want to go for. Now, if you like something like rock performance in anime or musical anime, then Inu-Oh is what you would go for. Now, if you want something like Knights of Sidonia, or Blam, or Biomega, or something that reminds you of Project Arms, or how would I say this? What was the name of that anime? Princess Mononoke meets Korra. If you want something like Princess Mononoke meets Korra, then Kaina of the Great Snow Sea. Because that's how it feels like to me. So either one of these three are good. And if you don't like either of those three, there's still the other two. There's still the Handyman Saito from Another World, and there's still Heike. I guarantee if you don't like those first three I said, you're damn sure are going to like Handyman Saito from Another World, because that's hilarious. And it has high potential. It might actually have higher potential than any of the other three. It might actually have higher potential than Kaina of the Great Snow Sea. That's why I was saying multiple times, don't sleep on Handyman Saito from Another World. It could actually be the anime to outdo the other three that I'm saying. So, that was my 5 for the month of January 2023. I do anime, I do manga, and I do games. And this was January 2023 anime. And if you like it, give this video a like. If you want to check it out, check it out. I try to break it down as fast as possible, as quick as possible. I'm talking about, there are three animes, 3 episodes per anime. I went through for all 5 of them. And there were about 20 animes I had to go through and watch their hooks, their stories. For the first episodes, I had to watch 20 animes and knock them down to say from their hooks and their story to see if they're worth it. And some of those animes weren't even released during the first 2 weeks. Some of them fell within the 3rd week of the month. So, yeah, I had to pick which one was the best one and which one was most appropriate, which one didn't have too much suggestive themes, which one wasn't deviating from the story, which one was completely ridiculous, and which ones weren't so depressing and boring that I couldn't stand to watch it. Now, there are honorable mentions, but those might come later on, and I will probably put them in the description of this video as honorable mentions. There are 2 of them are honorable mentions. And for all I know, those honorable mentions might actually themselves be beyond anything of these 5. Because I saw 2 of those honorable mentions before. And there was 2 of them I was struggling with to put on the top 5 list. But I just, for the life of me, didn't know what it was about them that I didn't like. But who knows? The story can become very good. So I'm going to put those 2 in addition towards these 5 with regards to my January 2023 anime. So that's it for today. And I'm done with this video. I'm going to upload this onto YouTube, and I'm going to upload it on right now. And hopefully you enjoy this and enjoy this video.